Chapter 1386. She hesitated for a long time but couldn't say anything in the end. Her face was already red and she felt like a steaming duck. I like Grandpa the most. Unfortunately, Loopy Toad didn't admit it. I said, don't use relatives to brush me off. The aura unique to a divine beast spread out, and the dense spirit power mixed with the power of chaos instantly shook the ground under its feet. Sometimes, without external pressure, people would not be able to face up to their own hearts. Seeing that Loopy Toad was really going to make a move, she became even more anxious. The girl stamped her feet anxiously. She didn't want to fight Loopy Toad, so she could only tell the truth. She almost shouted, "Classmate Wang Ling is my favorite." In a flash, Loopy Toad withdrew the aura it had released. Very good. It nodded in satisfaction, then put away the phone hidden in its dog mouth and pressed the stop recording button. Loopy Toad, you. Realizing that what she had said just now had been secretly recorded, Lotus Sun was frantic. Don't worry, Miss Sun, this king has integrity and won't send it to anyone else. Loopy Toad promised in front of her. Swear. Lotus Sun said anxiously with a red face. I swear. If this king dares to say anything about what happened today, I won't be a human for the rest of my life. Loopy Toad said. At first, this curse did sound vicious enough, but after thinking about it carefully, the girl instantly felt that she was at a disadvantage. But you're not a human to begin with. But this king also has a human form. Think about it, if I don't have a human form for the rest of my life, how bad would that be? Loopy Toad sighed. If I can't transform into a human form, I won't be able to smoothly fall in love with a big sister in the human world, run out at night to exercise, and then have a son and a daughter. This is tantamount to making an oath to end my family line. Isn't that vicious? All right then, Lotus Sun was stupefied by these words. Analyzing it this way, Loopy Toad's curse was indeed vicious enough. But she still felt that it sounded a little strange. Sun Yinger knew that she had been tricked. Her Rongrong was still too young. In order not to be tricked, Sun Yinger hurriedly spoke to Loopy Toad telepathically. Don't ask me questions that are too much. A more normal question. When we get back, I'll go to the demon realm and get you 20 sacks of meat flies. Loopy Toad raised its eyebrows at these words, and it nodded slightly to agree to the terms of the deal. Miss over there, please briefly describe your current situation. Loopy Toad looked at Sun Yinger and asked. This question made Sun Yinger burst into tears. It was just a brief summary of his current situation. She felt that she had a lot to say. But in the end, all that was left was a single sentence. Her eyes were filled with tears and her voice sounded like she was about to cry. A teardrop unconsciously fell from the corner of her eye. I'm a tough woman in the day, but it's hard to be a man at night. Lotus Sun and Loopy Toad. After verifying their identities, Lotus Sun and Loopy Toad went up the mountain together. Hidden in the dense forest ahead, an ancient temple gradually emerged. These bricks were made of the same material as the Divine Palace on Divine Tao Star, but they were clearly very old and had the faint aura of nomological laws flowing over them. The door of the temple was ajar. There were cracks on the door as if it had been hit by something fierce. The whole temple was covered in cobwebs and dust. It was obvious that it had been abandoned for many years and no one cared about it. Where on earth did Awan go? I looked around on the way here, and there's no other entrance except for a small path halfway up the mountain. Maybe she's still waiting for us in the back secret room. Loopy Toad said, she's the world king of the divine world, so it's unlikely that anything would happen to her. Furthermore, it's obvious that this Heavenly Tao secret room was the work of Old God. She used the Heavenly Tao magic cube to transform the original secret room inside the cube into her own secret room to record her and Tao ancestor Wang's past. There were all sorts of ways for couples to record their feelings. Using a diary to record their feelings, keeping all the photos and gifts they gave each other, writing their wishes on an old tree and tying a red rope together, and so on. This was the first time that a secret room had been modified to record their feelings. Mysterious Sea, please scan this place. Lotus Sun injected spirit energy into it, and Mysterious Sea in her hand immediately emitted a deep blue spirit light with her as the center. This spirit light turned into ripples that spread out from under Lotus Sun's feet, and in an instant, all the dust in the temple was washed away. In the blink of an eye, the temple, which had been covered in dust, was as clean as new. It actually has this kind of effect. Loopy Toad marveled in its heart. Isn't this a little overkill? Lotus Sun was a little embarrassed. No, Miss Sun is indeed a talent. She was actually able to turn a spirit sword into a wife. It looks like she'll be a good wife and mother in the future, Loopy Toad praised. Loopy Toad. I realized that after you became a divine beast, you're a little arrogant. Lotus Sun crouched down and rubbed Loopy Toad's face angrily. Can't you drink like before and be a little cuter? This king is a divine beast now, and a divine beast should have a divine beast subchild. Loopy Toad retorted. Quick look here. At that moment, Sun Yinger on the side made a new discovery. She saw 2 palm prints at the location of the ancient temple. This is... Staring at the palm prints, Lotus Sun was very puzzled and didn't understand why they had been formed. Sun Yinger, on the other hand, had a very experienced look on her face. Judging from the width of the palm prints, it should be a man's. He's probably very tall, and the knuckles are very thin, which proves that he has a very low fat content. He should be someone with an excellent figure. He's a handsome guy. How do you know so much? Lotus Sun was astonished. Damn. This old lady has been wall-stomped by Wang Ying so many times that I'm now wall-stomping experience. One look and you can tell that these palm prints were left by a wall-stomping, and there's a high chance that Tao ancestor Wang left them when he was wall-stomping old god. Sun Yinger analyzed forcefully. As expected, this temple is related to old god and Tao ancestor Wang. Maybe Tao ancestor Wang confessed to old god here back then. But just knowing this information isn't enough, said Lotus Sunday. Don't tell me I have to be wall-stomped before I can pass. Sun Yinger rubbed her chin, and then her eyes lit up as she stared at Lotus Sun and smiled maliciously. Rong. Please cooperate with me. What are you doing? Wall-stomping you, of course. Don't worry, I've been wall-stomped so many times, I'm very experienced. Sun Yinger chuckled. Saying that, she grabbed Lotus Sun's wrist, raised it above her head and slammed it into the wall. But for some reason, after Sun Yinger finished this action, she felt a chill run down her spine. That wasn't right? Why was Wang Ying's aura here? Sun Yinger instantly panicked a little. Chapter 1387. Wang Ying's aura was very strong, and Loopy Toad instantly broke out in a cold sweat. In fact, Wang Ying was the third line of protection in this operation. He had specially made this arrangement to ensure that nothing would go wrong in this operation. After receiving the order, Wang Ying merged with Loopy Toad's shadow and sneaked in. Furthermore, he had concealed himself very well along the way. Who knew that after seeing Sun Yinger push Lotus Sun against the wall, Wang Ying's emotions would start to fluctuate slightly? President Ying, you have to restrain yourself. Loopy Toad said telepathically as it did its best to pacify Wang Ying, hoping that she could calm down. If you want to deal with it, you can wait until we get out of here. These words finally calmed the restless Wang Ying down. Arms folded, he shrank into Loopy Toad's shadow and used it as cover as he quietly watched Sun Yinger's various reactions and performances. Danger. At this moment, Sun Yinger felt that there was a huge danger hanging over her head. She sensed her surroundings again and found that Wang Ying's aura had disappeared again. Was it an illusion? Or was it because he had been wall-pounded too many times that it affected her mental state, causing her aura detection system to make mistakes? Anyway, to sum it up, he was broken by Wang Ying, the gorilla. Woo. Wrong. I think Wang Ying, this gorilla, has made me a little abnormal. You finally realized. Lotus Sun sighed and stroked Sun Yinger's little head. Also, what the hell is a gorilla? Anyway, as long as I say his life will become like this, I might as well just call him orangutan. Sun Yinger said. Lotus Sun. In fact, sometimes Lotus Sun felt that Wang Ying was also quite difficult. Sun Yinger's mouth was very carefree, which was completely different from her character. She was purely a master of obscene words. But the problem was that Ying was very cute. He couldn't bear to let them be so ruthless. Although Ying complained to her every day about how Wang Ying bullied her, Lotus Sun never saw any external injuries on Sun Yinger's body. The facts proved that Wang Ying looked crazy, but he was actually a man with a sense of propriety. At this moment, a rumbling sound came from the ancient temple. The wall that had Tao ancestor Wang's palm imprint on it suddenly caved in, and then split to the left and right. It really is a mechanism. There's a hidden chamber inside. Sun Yinger exclaimed. When the wall was opened, what greeted everyone's eyes was a top-secret altar hidden behind the wall. A square altar? Loopy Toad was also surprised. Square altars were rare because most altars were fused with array formations, and most of the array formations were circular. However, the altar in front of him had the 4 corners of the room as fulcrum points, directly framing the entire room within the altar. Engraved on the ground were mysterious ancient characters that Loopy Toad couldn't understand. Most of these mysterious ancient characters were from the god race, and only a small portion were the characters of the heavenly path. This proved that the person who set up the altar was the old god himself. "This is an old god's altar," said Loopy Toad. Combining the scene in front of him, it was not difficult to deduce this conclusion. But now a new problem was born. What was the purpose of the old god setting up this altar? In the center of the altar, Lotus Sun found a very small coffin. She stepped forward and narrowed her eyes as she examined it carefully. This was custom made for the old god after he regained his youth? If it was just to build a coffin for himself, why would he go through so much effort to build such an altar? Said Loopy Toad. Wherever there was an altar, there was usually a purpose behind it. At the moment, they didn't have enough evidence, so for the time being, they couldn't conclude that this was the old god's plot. But based on experience and intuition, Loopy Toad felt that the existence of this altar definitely wasn't a good thing. At that moment, a chilly wind blew in the secret chamber with a bone-chilling coldness. Accompanied by the sound of a woman's sobbing, the coffin in front of Loopy Toad opened with a bang. It was the skeleton of a baby, but it was missing a right arm. The bones of the old god? Loopy Toad looked a little hesitant. Why would a deceased world king of the old god world emit such a powerful malicious ghost aura? This sudden chilly wind was permeated with a powerful oppressive force and energy, and also contained a kind of godly power. Although it was very faint, Loopy Toad could sense it. Then the altar glowed, and a phantom figure with closed eyes emerged from the center of the altar. Awan. The sudden appearance of the phantom stunned everyone. Lotus Sun was sure that she wasn't seeing things. This was Miss Awan's soul. In the coffin, the old god's remains in the shape of a baby trembled slightly. Awan's soul merged with the remains and finally turned into a little girl in a red dress and black leather shoes. This was the old god's little girl form, which everyone had seen in the previous picture scroll. "I've been waiting for this day." The little girl spoke, but it was extremely old and clearly wasn't Awan's voice. "You're the old god?" Lotus Sun looked ahead warily. She couldn't believe that Awan had actually been attacked after they separated. "What did you do to Awan?" "I've waited for many years without choosing the next successor of the old god world, all for this day." The little girl said, "There's no one more suitable than Awan. She is an ageless soul. As long as she is old enough, she can merge with my infant remains. Theoretically, I can be restored to the appearance of 16 or 17 years old, and my appearance will be forever fixed at that time. But you seem a little impatient." Loopy Toad looked at the little girl in front of it. The old goddess of the deity world, the previous world king of the deity world, her aura was extremely terrifying. This was the first time Loopy Toad had felt Myriad Wings God's aura. It was indeed ridiculously strong. "That's right. Awan is still too young now. If she can grow up to be a mature woman and merge with me, that might be what I want." He smiled calmly. "But Tao Ancestor Wang doesn't mind your appearance, even in your old age." From the very beginning, she had been envious of this kind of love, and at the same time, she admired Tao Ancestor Wang very much. "He doesn't mind, but I do." The old god said, "No woman can endure her old age. I can endure the pain of having to part with the person I love after regaining my youth. But Tao Ancestor has a way." Lotus Sun said. "There's nothing he can do. Don't think you know everything. A man's words can never be trusted." The old god was very unhappy. "In order to make the deity world a better place, I can only sacrifice Awan. There's nothing I can do about it. It's nothing but grandiose hypocritical talk." Lotus Sun frowned. "Tao Ancestor Wang actually likes you. That might be the biggest stain in his life." Saying this, she gripped Mysterious Sea tightly, her body trembling with anger. "What? You still want to fight me? A Foundation establishment cultivator?" The old god smiled. "Hand over Miss Awan." The next moment, she pulled out Mysterious Sea and pointed the blade at the old god. "Otherwise, even if you are a god, I will kill you. Otherwise, even if you're a god, I won't be polite." Sword chi mixed with the heavenly Tao magic cube and the power of primal chaos whistled out. The old god's shoulders sank on the spot. "Impossible." The old god looked up, astonishment written all over his face. Chapter 1388. There was no way a normal Foundation establishment cultivator could unleash such sword chi. Calm Goddess looked warily at the girl in front of her, and saw the phantom sword spirit hiding behind Lotus Sunday. After the upgrade, Mysterious Sea was dressed in a gorgeous dark blue evening dress. His sapphire-like eyes gave off a deep feeling as if they were thousands of kilometers under the sea, and his silver-gray hair hung down in beautiful curls like the waves. Inadvertently, a faintly discernible and invisible pressure spread out, mingling with Lotus Sun's aura. One with the sword, there was no distinction between them at this moment. Mysterious C's bond with Lotus Sun was too deep. This was the spirit sword that Lotus Sun had been using since she was a child. After a long period of companionship, coupled with Mysterious C's gratitude to the sword master after his upgrade, the bond between the two deepened, forming a passive one with the sword. Lotus Sun only needed to pull out the spirit sword, and Mysterious C's aura would automatically merge with her. Calm Goddess looked at this scene in astonishment. At that moment she finally knew what the problem was. You actually fused one of the heavenly Tao magic cubes into your spirit sword? This operation directly scared the old goddess silly. She knew how precious the heavenly Tao magic cube was. What an audacious human. On the altar, the little girl stood calmly on a high platform. Floating in the air, she gazed down at Lotus Sunday. Do you know what will happen if the Rubik's Cube loses balance? The next moment, a brilliant golden halo lit up above her head, releasing an immortal aura. This was Myriad Wings God's unique divine halo, and it possessed formidable godly power. After deducing and combining the memories in Awan's soul, the old goddess knew what had happened before she was officially resurrected. The unspeakable land had been destroyed. One of the 9 heavenly Tao magic cubes had been stolen, which directly caused the other 8 cubes to go out of control at any time. The one that Tao ancestor Wang had given her back then had already gone out of control. No wonder she had vaguely sensed that something was wrong on Divine Tao Star after her resurrection. Everything made sense now. No wonder Awan had entered the secret room of the heavenly Tao magic cube so much earlier than she had speculated. Who would have thought that it was actually because the magic cube had lost balance, and Awan had brought a Foundation establishment human here to retrieve the cube. This action disrupted the old god's plan to absorb Awan's ageless soul. In addition, she had long been unable to restrain the impulse in her heart. Therefore, even though he knew that the time was much earlier than the estimated time, he still did not dare to act rashly. The old god still chose to attack and devour Awan's soul. We didn't know this would happen, so now we need to collect the cubes one by one and replace them with new ones, Lotus Sun replied. New Rubik's Cube. The old god laughed again. You say I'm hypocritical, but you're even more hypocritical than me. Back then, the Tao ancestor had spent countless years creating a Rubik's Cube. Do you think that this heavenly Tao magic cube is made of mud? Do you think you can make it so easily? The next moment, the surrounding space collapsed, and the myriad-winged divine ring above the old god's head burst into a brilliant light. Lotus Sun and Loopy Toad saw the scene in front of them instantly change. When they came back to their senses, they were astonishingly in a bright world. Divine clouds coiled under their feet and runes swirled around them. The old god in the form of a little girl sat cross-legged in front of them, as huge as a mountain. She looked like an eternally motionless deity who exuded a dignified aura. If it wasn't for the fact that her red dress and black leather shoes were too dramatic, everyone would have turned pale at this scene. Inner world. Loopy Toad frowned. This clearly wasn't an ordinary inner world because the energy flowing in it was too enormous. Don't think that you're the only one who has the heavenly Tao magic cube. Tao ancestor gave me a token of love, and I've already fused part of its power into my inner world. The old god's ethereal voice came from all directions. You're a mere Foundation establishment cultivator. Even if you use the spirit sword in your hand, how much can you do? The old god in the form of a little girl couldn't help laughing. It was taboo to be dragged into the inner world in the middle of a battle. In the inner world, the master of the inner world was the god here. What was more, she herself was a god. With one finger you'll be reduced to ashes. Do you have any last words? The old god said in a low voice. She sat cross-legged in this world full of light, and her powerful aura soared. This was the first time that Lotus Sun had faced an opponent the size of a mountain. Anyone would tremble at the huge disparity in size. But she recalled that when the gate between worlds had descended back then, Ajwa had also faced a demon king the size of a mountain. She already knew that Ajwa had won by doing nothing. But at that time, he had still charged forward without any regard for his own safety. He had clearly known that there was a huge disparity in strength, but he had still done it without hesitation. And this was also why Wang Ling had chosen Ajwa back then. Not everyone who was weak couldn't become a hero. As long as their hearts were strong enough, no matter how weak they were still heroes. In that instant, Lotus Sun's thoughts were a million thoughts. What the predecessors had seen, and now, the power that Wang Ling had bestowed upon her. It gave her great confidence in that moment. The moment she held Mysterious Sea, she suddenly felt countless people pushing her forward from behind. It's not certain who'll be reduced to ashes. The next moment, the girl rose from the ground with Mysterious Sea's sword chi. Under Lotus Sun's feet, Mysterious Sea's sword chi turned into two jets that allowed her to fly freely in the air. She aimed the tip of Mysterious Sea's sword chi at the huge old god in front of her, and she turned into a brilliant azure meteor as she charged forward recklessly. You overestimate yourself. Old God snorted and opened his divine eyes. Two beams of light shot out of his pupils like two dragons. They merged in the air to form a huge dragon, which swiftly crashed in Lotus Sun's direction with boundless godly might. This was Old God's boundless godly light. After incorporating part of the heavenly Tao Magic Cube's power, this was equivalent to an attack from a Tao god. In the end, she's Tao ancestor Wang's old flame. She's indeed terrifying. Lotus Sun's sword is so powerful that I'm afraid she's no match for him. Loopy Toad was horrified. It looked up at this scene from below and assessed the battle situation at the same time. When Lotus Sun had leapt up just now, Loopy Toad had already wrapped some of the power of chaos around Mysterious Sea to secretly help her kill Old God in one blow. But now it seemed that Old God's power was too fierce, and Loopy Toad's strength alone was far from enough. No hurry. Wang Ying frowned. He had come to make sure that the situation was foolproof. His analysis of Old God's battle strength was also more accurate. Although Lotus Sun's attack wasn't enough to kill Old God in one blow, it was still enough to shatter this boundless godly light and teach him a lesson. Because Old God had been too careless, he hadn't used his full strength. Rip. Sure enough, everything was as Wang Ying had expected. The azure streak of light that Lotus Sun had turned into tore Old God's boundless godly light to shreds like a sharp blade. She was extremely fast and still moving at a high speed. She shot toward Old God. Old God couldn't dodge in time, and Lotus Sun directly cut off a piece of his scalp. The cross-section was as smooth as a mirror, and could even reflect light. Chapter 1389. Lotus Sun had directly shaved off a piece of Old God's head to form a physical version of the Mediterranean Sea. Moreover, Mysterious Sea had played a trick by covering her sword chi with the power of the Dead Sea. This was originally an ability similar to this serious injury effect, which could block the recovery. But now that the sword chi had shaved off Old God's scalp, Old God wouldn't be able to recover her hair in the short term. She could only fight Lotus Sun with a bald head. Old God trembled with rage as she watched a chunk of her hair fall off. Her mountainous body shook violently in the inner world, causing the whole world to rumble. I'll kill you. Infuriating Old God's face was naturally an extremely terrifying thing. Old God shrunk her body, and her expression turned serious. The 10,000 wings divine ring above her head charged at Lotus Sun with matchless divine might. Old God spread her golden wings, which exuded powerful godly might. Why isn't it 10,000 wings? Loopy Toad was surprised. They're one. If I directly spread them, they'll be like sails with too much air resistance. Even Old God probably won't be able to fly, Wang Ying replied. This answer was so scientific that Loopy Toad couldn't refute it. At that moment, Old God, whose scalp had been shaved off, was furious. As the golden wings trembled, starlight formed on the horizon and huge meteorites fell one after another. Lotus Sun held Mysterious Sea in her hand, and sword chi of the boundless ocean rampaged through the falling meteorites, shattering them one by one. I'm going to make you realize the reality that you can never go against God. The next moment, divine light burst forth from Old God's red clothes, and starlight gathered under her feet. Together with the endless drifting golden divine feathers, it turned into a star carpet which was laid out under her feet. This was a kind of transcendent power that indeed only a god could do. She didn't speak as she walked on the red carpet, but divine light surged in her eyes as powerful fluctuations built up in them. You will fall in this galaxy. The next moment, Old God raised her hand. With a flip of her hand, the star carpet under her feet instantly flipped over, and countless stars poured down. In a flash, the entire inner world was covered in a shower of meteorites. Hundreds of thousands of stars appeared and crashed down like a dense hailstorm. She actually turned the divine feathers into stars. Loopy Toad's eyes were filled with shock. This change was not a trick but a real change. Theoretically, the will of God could change everything. God was almost omnipotent. Lotus Sun's expression was solemn. She jumped onto a meteor and used Mysterious Sea's sword chi to block the attack. However, the density of these meteors was simply too high. Now, it had reached the point where he had no choice but to use his ultimate move to clear the area. City-toppling sword. Lotus Sun pointed to the sky and unleashed her most powerful sword technique. A 10,000-meter-long sword chi instantly formed under the astonished gaze of the old god. The sword intent of the raging sea mixed with the tsunami echo of the heavenly Tao bell made the light of the entire core world even more dazzling. Mysterious Sea's body suddenly expanded, and she looked like a female giant. The power accumulated by the tens of thousands of doppelgangers caused Mysterious Sea's sword chi to truly turn into a vast ocean, colliding with the starry river that was pouring down. F***K, this is actually a freaking battle between Foundation establishment cultivators. Loopy Toad was stupefied. It had been pressed underground the entire time in the Cultivation secret land on Back Mountain and had almost become dog jerky, so it had no idea what was going on outside. Now that it saw this scene with its own eyes, its mouth felt like it had been dislocated and it couldn't close it. Rumble. The powerful city-toppling sword collided with the starry river with the power of the ocean, swallowing up all the falling meteors and then crushing them to pieces in the ocean. At that moment, Old God looked down with a very complicated expression. A Foundation establishment cultivator actually had the ability to resist the power of a god. This was undoubtedly a provocation. But the old god could also clearly sense the true battle prowess in Lotus Sun's body. This city-toppling sword had frightened her and actually caused her mind to fluctuate. The 10,000-meter-long sword chi practically crushed the starry river she had summoned in two and dissolved all her godly power. Old God flapped his golden wings and swiftly retreated. She crossed her arms in front of her, and the 10,000-meter-long sword chi crashed into her crossed arms. The sword sent Old God flying to the end of the core world and crashing into the wall of the void. This sword was too terrifying. It had almost pierced a hole in the core world and even pulled her, the master of the core world, out, but Old God was Old God. Her combat experience was far beyond Lotus Sun's. For a Foundation establishment cultivator to be able to unleash such a powerful sword strike, she must have been accumulating power in her spare time. Thus, she was sure that Lotus Sun couldn't unleash such a powerful killing move in a row. And in fact, this was indeed the case. The city-toppling sword took 12 hours to charge up. Lotus Sun could charge up to 10 strikes, but it hadn't been that long since she had last used it. I'm very curious. How many more strikes can you unleash? Old God smiled. She knew that her chance had come. Rong. Retreat. This woman is going to go big. Sun Yinger realized that the situation wasn't good, and hurriedly pulled Lotus Sun back. She sensed the killing intent in Old God's eyes and felt that the situation wasn't good, so she immediately sprinted 10,000 meters with Lotus Sun in her arms, even using the distance shrinking technique to keep her distance. Want to leave? Old God shook her head slightly. This was her core world and no one could escape. He merely crooked his finger. Sun Yinger, who had already slipped far away, was once again brought back to a place not far from the calm goddess. In the inner world, the owner of the inner world could limit the range of battle and no one could escape. Give this to them. At this moment, Wang Ying finally decided to take action. However, it wasn't a real attack. Instead, it was just a tool to assist him. Huddled in Loopy Toad's shadow, he stretched out his hand and put something in Loopy Toad's mouth. This is... Loopy Toad was startled. A power bank enchanted by the Lord, Wang Ying replied. Loopy Toad, the situation was so urgent that Loopy Toad didn't have time to think. With the power bank in its tongue, it instantly stretched out in Lotus Sun's direction. Miss Lotus Sun, catch. This is a power bank that the commander gave you. Charger, power bank? Lotus Sun thought she had misheard. In the end, a power bank was delivered to her. With Loopy Toad's tip, Lotus Sun smoothly found the charging port on the hilt of the Mysterious Sea sword, and it was a Type-C port. This was something that had existed after upgrading the Mysterious Sea. The monk didn't say anything and even Lotus Sun herself didn't realize it, because the location was very well hidden. Furthermore, who the hell knew that there was a charging port on the hilt? How much sword chi can a mere power bank give you? Old God smiled again. Lotus Sun connected the power bank. In the next moment, she felt Mysterious Sea sword chi fill up at a terrifying speed. Then, Lotus Sun raised the sword again and swung it at Old God. Alluring sword. Alluring sword. Alluring sword. At that moment, Mysterious Sea, who felt the strength in his body gradually fill up, turned his gaze to Lotus Sun and asked gently, Sword Master, this is too troublesome. Do I need to use 10 swords at once? Lotus Sun covered her mouth with an astonished expression. Can classmate Wang Ling's power bank recharge so many swords? Indeed. Mysterious C nodded. But the sword spirit space is limited, and I can only use 10 swords at once. Based on the total amount of energy this power bank can provide, it can provide 10,000 rounds of sword chi in total. Question mark. Hearing this, old god was so shocked that his feathers stood on end. What the hell, was this a nuclear power bank? Chapter 1390. The overturning sword caught the old god off guard and caught her off guard. She had almost been sucked out of the inner world earlier. And the power of 10 consecutive overturning swords was unstoppable. What was more, this wasn't the first time. Mysterious C fired 10 consecutive overturning swords, which was 10 consecutive overturning swords. Under this attack, which sounded like a Russian doll trap, cracks appeared in the old god's inner world. The whole world shook and all the space walls around them shattered. In this situation, it looked like the old god was powerless to resist. Hands on her hips, Sun Yinger had a proud expression on her face. So what if you're the old god? My Rongrong is Ling Jinren's woman. Ling Jinren? The old god searched through her memories. She realized that she didn't have this person in mind. Logically speaking, if it was someone Awan knew after she swallowed Awan's soul, she should have also obtained Awan's memories. In the end, the old god's mind was blank. She seemed to know but also didn't. This was the effect of the great shielding spell. After all, the old god had never met Wang Ling, so it was useless even if she swallowed Awan's soul and obtained his memories. If she had known earlier what kind of player was standing behind the person she was facing, given the old god's intelligence, she would never have dared to put on airs and court death like this. So sometimes being stupid was one thing. Not having a clear understanding of one's own abilities was another. The 100 overturning swords in front of her made the old god feel powerless to reverse the situation. She kept retreating, and the sword chi cut open several more wounds on her already bald head, from which blood trickled down. At this most critical moment, the old god took out her other magic treasure. It was a golden holy shield. Although it was golden, it was made of godly wood. A golden holy spirit shield. It was one of the old god's most powerful world-defying magic treasures. Furthermore, this holy spirit shield was one of the gifts that Dao ancestor Wang had given her back then. It was A+2 world-defying magic treasure. It came with 20% power of primal chaos. Boom. When the 100 overturning swords piled together, it actually gave off the aura of the domain of the gods and the spirit sea. The air in front of her was drowned in a deep blue glow, and before she could see it clearly, the surging sword chi was already upon her. They were all women. Don't think that you're the only one with support. The one standing behind this old mother is Dao ancestor Wang. She raised the shield of the Holy Spirit high up. When she took out this magic tool, her confidence seemed to have increased a lot. Although old god had lost the upper hand and became very passive, the existence of the Holy Spirit shield seemed to have changed the whole situation. Wang Long. A resplendent golden light erupted from the shield of the Holy Spirit, illuminating the surroundings and burning the 9 heavens. A powerful aura of the great Tao emanated from it. For a moment, the entire world was filled with thousands of Dharma images, and all kinds of living beings appeared. Light elephant, light python, light lion, light leopard, light Pikachu. Each of these living beings was as big as a mountain. They rushed forward and blocked the swords for the old god, blocking all the hundreds of devastatingly beautiful swords. Mysterious sea sword chi clashed with the Holy Spirit shield's golden light and the creature's image, causing the sky to explode with dense fog covering everything. Lotus Sun cleaved the fog in front of her in two, but saw old god holding up the shield of the Holy Spirit with a smug smile on his face. With Dao ancestor Wang's shield of the Holy Spirit here, do you really think you can cleave it in two? Old god smiled. This was A+2 world-defying magic tool, fused with 20% of the power of primal chaos. It was rare in the world. And most importantly, Dao ancestor Wang had given her more than just the shield of the Holy Spirit. She hadn't had the chance to take out other magic tools, but they were just as useful. But old god hadn't expected that he would use the shield of the Holy Spirit for the first time in his life, and it would actually be to deal with a little Foundation establishment girl. In the sky, Lotus Sun pursed her lips. She didn't want to argue with old god. There was no point and no result. In front of her, old god seemed more like a woman who had fallen out of favor. Because only when one fell out of favor would one develop such a strong competitive mentality. Lotus Sun disdained to compare herself with old god, because there was no need. But old god didn't think so. I don't care who the person behind you is. No matter how strong that person is, can he be stronger than Tao Ancestor? Back then, Tao Ancestor only doted on me and gave me so many treasures. Old God sneered. I admit that I underestimated you. You, a Foundation establishment cultivator, being able to force me to take out the shield of the Holy Spirit is unprecedented. In the face of the overbearing old god, Lotus Sun still maintained the dignified posture of a well-bred lady. Even old god's provocative words didn't cause the girl's expression to fluctuate in the slightest. Because she knew very well that whatever she didn't want to say, Sun Yinger would definitely say it. Who knew that while she was a well-bred lady, Shadow was an expert at shooting her mouth off. Sure enough, Sun Yinger couldn't take it anymore. She suddenly put her hands on her hips and attacked old god. Blah blah blah. You old woman. You keep saying that men are all bad things, and you're still using the thing Tao Ancestor Wang gave you. What a waste of his infatuation for you and you. Regarding his suspicions, in the words of the present, he was just a green tea. Do gods also have green tea? Gods were not supposed to get angry. But now, old god had actually already lost his mind a little. Women couldn't be compared with each other. The girl in front of her was clearly only at the Foundation establishment stage, but she had the battle strength to contend with old god. This was enough to prove how much effort the person behind her had spent on her. Wang Ling had actually just helped Lotus Sun increase her battle strength in passing. It couldn't really be considered a lot of effort. But there was nothing he could do, that was what old god thought. Now that Tao Ancestor Wang's whereabouts were unknown, old god indeed felt like an old woman who had fallen out of favor. Lotus Sun's existence made her feel jealous. And this jealousy would turn into anger toward Lotus Sunday. If you want to kill me, break my shield of the Holy Spirit first, old god said softly with narrowed eyes in the air at that moment. She sat cross-legged on a divine cloud and raised the shield of the Holy Spirit. All kinds of golden creatures surged out from all directions, surrounding her tightly. This shield of the Holy Spirit is hard to deal with. It can even block the sword chi of 100 city-toppling swords. It's a good idea to use numbers in a situation where there isn't enough power. Unfortunately, with just Mysterious C's power as a sword spirit, even if he unleashes 10 swords at once, it still won't be fast enough. Loopy Toad watched with worry. In Mysterious C's full energy form, the power of 10 consecutive swords still wouldn't be enough to knock old god down. It looked at Wang Ying, hinting for her to make a move. But Wang Ying still didn't move. Although this was just old god, in Wang Ying's opinion, she could kill him with a flip of her hand. Lord Ling didn't need to do anything at all. He could do it as a shadow. But this was a rare opportunity to gain experience. If he made a move, the battle would be over, which would be bad for both Lotus Sun and Inge. Both of them lacked combat experience, and at the same time, they lacked the tacit understanding to cooperate with each other. Thus, this was an excellent opportunity for them to improve. Fighting an expert would undoubtedly give them a huge boost in experience. Fighting hundreds or even thousands of battles with cultivators of the same realm might not be as effective as this one. Indeed, in Wang Ling and Wang Ying's eyes, old god wasn't an expert. Perhaps Miss Sun can think of a way, Wang Ying said. In a situation where one's combat strength was at the same level, one had to know how to use their techniques flexibly and throw themselves back into the fight. This was one of the skills and experiences of advanced combat. Can you split other things with your splitting ability? Yes. I just need to add my splitting nomological power to it. But my strength is now being restricted by Gorilla Wang Ying. Sun Yinger had just said this when she suddenly had a surprised expression on her face. Why do I suddenly feel like my strength has returned? She was extremely astonished. Because right after she finished complaining, the power that had been restricted by Wang Ying actually returned in an instant. This caused Sun Yinger to feel terrified in her heart. Good. Now work with me will break her shield. Splitting Mysterious C externally. This was her battle plan. Monk Golden Lamp had set up the splitting nomological power inside the sword spirit space mainly so that Mysterious C could recharge itself through its split body. And now, the charging problem inside had already been solved with the power bank that Wang Ling had provided. Then, as long as the external split was completed, a fully charged Mysterious C would continuously split and replicate. In theory, it would be possible to produce a large amount of sword chi in a very short period of time. One Mysterious C could release 10 swords in a row in one go. Then 10 Mysterious Cs. That was 1,000 swords. 100 Mysterious Cs, that was 10,000 swords. Even if old god had the shield of Holy Spirit. Under the absolute number of 10,000 swords, it would be difficult for him to resist. Frowning, Lotus Sun became even more serious. The boundless ocean behind her surged with the power of an extremely powerful moon finger. The two women communicated in secret. At that moment, Sun Yinger also started to exert force. She slapped the splitting nomological power at the back of the mysterious sea. For a moment, countless mysterious seas that were saturated with energy started to split. 1 became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 8. More and more mysterious seas appeared behind her like an army. You want to play this game with me? It could only be said that Old God was indeed Old God. She immediately sensed Lotus Sun's countermeasure. With a wave of her hand, she took out a jade horsetail whisk. This was the Myriad Realm horsetail whisk, which was also a gift from Tao ancestor Wang. It could gather the dust of heaven and earth, making each grain as heavy as a mountain. It was the best way to restrict the mysterious seas from splitting. But just as she was about to wave the horsetail whisk, countless Sun Yinger in front of her turned into black shadows and attacked her in an attempt to stop her. Get out of the way. Old God shouted and had no choice but to wave the horsetail whisk to drive away these Sun Yinger splits. With me here, don't even think about stopping Rong. Sun Yinger snorted, and the countless splits attacked Old God from all directions like missiles. The moment they got close to Old God, they immediately exploded in a standard suicide attack. Old God had no choice but to wave the horsetail whisk to drive them away. This was a diversion tactic. By the time Old God reacted, it was already too late to stop the mysterious seas from splitting. The splitting of the mysterious seas had already become a major trend, and it was no longer something she could solve with her horsetail whisk. There were 1,000 mysterious seas. They burst forth with powerful boundless ocean chi. These auras superimposed to form the virtual image of a divine sea whale in the air. It's actually so powerful that it can form a virtual whale. Loopy Toad was shocked. This was a phenomenon that could only be formed when a water-type spirit sword was powerful enough. The power of a whale's fall was a symbol of the ocean nurturing and accommodating all things. At that moment, Lotus Sun stood in front of 1,000 mysterious seas that were saturated with energy. The huge divine sea whale was entrenched at her feet, and as it swung its tail, a tsunami surged and released terrifying fluctuations. At this moment, she was like a female general. The azure blue dress that Awan had given her was like a battle armor. The wind howled, the sword chi and the sound of the wind interweaved, playing a heroic battle song of a woman. Mysterious seas, heed my command. Lotus Sun shouted. Here, Sword Master. The 1,000 mysterious seas replied in unison. Kill. In the next moment, the girl pointed to the sky and waved the spirit sword in her hand. Facing Old God, she slashed forward. 10,000 sword chi shot out at the same time and slashed forward. Oh no. Old God knew that things weren't looking good. These 10,000 sword chi were too turbulent. Before they could even get close, the sword wind that was strong enough to cut through space had already twisted her face. This sword chi was so strong that it could be said to be unprecedented. The auras of 10,000 city-toppling swords overlapped, and the sword chi had an armor-piercing effect as it directly penetrated her Holy Spirit shield. Not only did it instantly destroy the golden light beasts around her, it also shook her so much that she coughed up blood repeatedly. Blood dripped from the corners of Old God's mouth and mixed with the red clothes he was wearing, making it impossible to distinguish the color at all. Realizing that the situation wasn't good, Old God still decided to flee. Retreat? There was no doubt that this was an incomparably humiliating choice for a god. She had actually been forced to flee in panic by a Foundation establishment cultivator. But for Old God there was already no other way. She had already made up her mind. Once she successfully retreated, she would detonate the entire Heavenly Tao Magic Cube and blow up Divine Tao Star. This Lotus Sun couldn't be left alive. Even if she had to pay the price of the entire Divine Tao Star, she had to be completely destroyed. However, just as Old God was about to abandon the inner world and flee, an incomparably dazzling golden light fell from the sky. What is this? Old God was stupefied. Enveloped by this golden light, she couldn't move at all. This is young Master Ling's stand at attention and take a beating spell. Loopy Toad recognized the origin of this spell. It was a branch of the great immobilizing spell. Those hit by the spell would be frozen in place and unable to move as they faced the full brunt of the attack. Even though I was sent here, Lord Ling still couldn't help making a move. Sure enough, this man is spying on everything. Wang Ying smiled bitterly. Everything was over. In the sky, Old God was completely immobilized by the stand at attention and take a beating spell. She had to face the impact of Lotus Sun's 10,000 sword chi head-on. The scene in front of her was like the end of the universe. The 10,000 sword chi smashed her inner world to pieces, and there were holes and storms everywhere. I'm Tao Ancestor Wang's woman. You dare touch me? Old God's face was full of fear. If you kill me, Wan will die too. Don't you understand? At that moment, Sun Yinger chuckled. The man behind my Rongrong is omnipotent. Boom. Sword energy surged and smashed into the old god. Everything there exploded and broke into pieces. Then the entire inner world started to collapse. The power of chaos in the universe seeped in through the cracks and mingled with the sword chi, and everything in the world wailed. Sun Yinger's words. They were also the last words old god heard before she was cut to pieces by the 10,000 sword chi. Chapter 1391. When old goddess disappeared, her iconic red dress disappeared along with the pair of golden wings. Even the 10,000-winged divine ring on her head fell off. After the destruction of the inner world, Lotus Sun and the others reappeared in the Temple of Freedom, and she picked up the 10,000-winged divine ring that had fallen to the ground. For a moment, all the secret rooms in the heavenly Tao magic cube started to shake as if they had been stimulated. The space walls on all sides started to compress in the center, and they were about to shrink into a ball. Loopy Toad could clearly sense a powerful resentment at work. It's old goddess. This woman is using her remnant thoughts to activate the magic cube, intending to blow us all up inside. Then what should we do? Sun Yinger had no clue what to do, and could only cry with Lotus Sunday, boo-hoo. Rong. I hope I'll still be your shadow in my next life. Stupid Inger, don't say your last words so early. Lotus Sun was very calm as she looked at Loopy Toad. If Boss Ing is here, he'll have a way, right? Wang Ing had been cooped up in Loopy Toad's shadow for a long time. At that moment, he finally emerged and asked with a smile, "When did you find me?" When Inger's strength returned, "I was already sure that you were with us," Lotus Sun said. She looked at Wang Ing. "Can you take us out?" "Of course," Wang Ing said confidently and then looked at Sun Yinger. "Unfortunately, you can't be Miss Sun's shadow in her next life. Besides, I heard all the bad things you said about me before. I'll settle the score with you after we get out." Sun Yinger, Wang Ing had already prepared an escape route, which was why Wang Ling had sent him here. Thus, there was no need to find the exit of any secret room at all. This mere Heavenly Tao secret room couldn't trap people like Wang Ling and Wang Ing. Then a pitch-black passage opened in front of them. What a pity that the Heavenly Tao secret room was compressed, and all the good things in it were destroyed, Loopy Toad said regretfully. That counts as good? Wang Ing couldn't help laughing. To be exact, he thought that in old goddess's eyes, these things might be good things. But whether it was Wang Ling or Wang Ing himself, they were worthless. When women became ruthless, they were indeed terrifying. He had actually thought of using the Heavenly Tao chamber that he had painstakingly modified to commemorate his relationship with Tao Ancestor Wang to bury another woman that he was jealous of. One could only say that Tao Ancestor Wang had made a mistake. Secondly, the old man still didn't have a clear understanding of himself. If this old god knew that Lotus Sun was safe and sound, he would probably die with everlasting regret, right? After leaving the secret room of the Heavenly Tao magic cube, Lotus Sun stood next to the sinkhole on Divine Tao Star and gazed into the abyss below. A glittering magic cube floated up from the bottom of the abyss. To her astonishment, the Rubik's Cube actually fused with the mysterious sea in her hand. Congratulations, Miss Sunday. Your mysterious sea is now a dual-core spirit sword. Aren't we going to hold the upgrade ceremony? Lotus Sun was surprised. She had heard from the monk that the dual-core mysterious sea could unleash the power of the overturning the world sword. The might of one sword was equivalent to 100 city-toppling swords. The heavens tesseract will attract and resonate with each other. The upgrade ritual only needs to be carried out once, and it will be used to fuse mysterious sea with the first heavens tesseract, Wang Ing replied. He gazed at the twin mysterious sea in Lotus Sun's hand and sensed the powerful battle prowess it exuded. The power of Lotus Sun's sword was now comparable to that of a Tao god. There was probably no one below the Tao god level who could withstand this kind of sword power. I took another Rubik's Cube. What should we do about the hole in it? Lotus Sun was worried. I naturally have a way to deal with that. After saying that, Wang Ing took out a brand new Heavenly Tao Tesseract from his sleeve. This cube was golden in color. It was the same color as fresh crispy noodle snacks. Just replace it with a new one, Wang Ing said. This was prepared from the beginning? No, it's fresh out of the oven. It's fresh out of the oven. Your Excellency just pinched it. It's not difficult to make, but it's more difficult to collect the materials. Wang Ying said. Monk Jin Deng was in charge of collecting the materials, and it took him a day to collect the materials for 2 Rubik's Tesseract. After receiving the materials, Lord instantly needed 2. One was used to fill the hole in the unspeakable land, and now this one is used to repair Divine Tao Star. After saying that, he threw the golden heavenly Tao Tesseract into the pit below. In the blink of an eye, the bottom of the abyss, which had been buried in endless darkness, shone brilliantly. Like a sweet spring, the dazzling light of restoration gushed out from the depths of the abyss to mend the hole in the sky pit. The sky pit was rapidly being filled up at a speed visible to the naked eye, and in less than a minute, it was completely repaired. Even the buildings that had been swallowed up by the sky pit were completely restored. So, will the heavenly Tao Tesseract's imbalance be stopped? Loopy Toad asked at that moment. It's just that it won't happen for the time being. There are currently 9 heavenly Tao Tesseracts, so keeping each other in check isn't a problem. But the new Rubik's Tesseract is too powerful, and it's definitely not a long-term solution. So if we want to replace it, we'll have to replace the remaining 7. Wang Ying said as he looked at Lotus Sunday. From today on, Miss Sun's job every night is to replace the Rubik's Tesseract. Now that you have dual mysterious sea cores, your battle strength has increased significantly. With Ing to protect you, it's good to use this opportunity to go out and gain experience. I'll do my best. Lotus Sun said. Wang Ying noticed that the girl didn't look as happy as he had imagined. Is Miss Sun worried about Awan? Her soul has been swallowed by Old God. Can classmate Wang Ling do anything? Actually, there's no need for Lord Ling to do anything. Wang Ying shook his head and smiled. That Qing Tong cat in the forsaken land of the gods was already one of them. It wouldn't be difficult at all for him to say hello and capture Awan's soul. As for the soul that had been swallowed by Old God, it actually wasn't Awan's complete soul. The Qing Tong cat had deliberately split it up for Old God. After Awan's soul had been split up, the Qing Tong cat had swiftly used its magic power to repair it. Repairing souls was also one of the abilities of the pillar spirit of the divine pillar. At that moment, Lotus Sun suddenly felt the myriad wings god ring on her wrist tremble slightly. The curly-haired girl was like a kitten that had poked its head out of a coffee cup, and she abruptly poked her head out of the divine ring. Nah, I'm back. Awan. Lotus Sun was pleasantly surprised. I think I'm a little stuck. Wait for Awan. Lotus Sun cupped Awan's face, then handed the divine ring to Sun Yinger. Help me. Let's pull Awan out together. 1, 2, 3. Harder. The 2 girls worked together, and with a slurp, the curly-haired girl was pulled out of the narrow divine ring. Old God's divine ring is too small. Awan rubbed her chest. This was where she had been stuck just now. Pulling it out by force had rubbed against her chest. Sun Yinger smiled evilly. I didn't expect Awan to be so big despite her young age. I heard from Old God that you're an ageless soul and will never age. Aren't you the legendary legal Lolita? AI, ageless souls aren't as good as I thought. I don't know why Old God is so obsessed with this. Awan sighed. With that, she bowed deeply to the crowd. This time, thank you all for your help. Awan, you're welcome. The person you should really thank is classmate Wang Ling. Lotus Sun smiled. I'll never forget Ling Jinren's kindness. I'll definitely repay it. After saying that, Awan looked up at Lotus Sunday, and don't worry Rongrong, I'm not talking about repaying you with my body. What does it have to do with me? Lotus Sun's face started to heat up again. Although she had been teased time and again these days, it seemed that she still hadn't gotten used to this kind of teasing. AI, it was really too hard to fall in love with a blockhead. At that moment, Awan said to Wang Ying, her eyes twinkling cutely. Your Excellency Wang Ying, you and Immortal Toad can go back first. I have something to give to Rongrong. Okay, it's getting late. No. 60 High School will resume classes tomorrow. I hope Miss Sun will come back soon, Wang Ying said. I know. Lotus Sun nodded. Wang Ying deliberately reminded her of the time for a reason. It was now past 5 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. There were less than 3 hours to go before the reduced time of 8 o'clock every night. As soon as Lotus Sun returned to Earth, Sun Yinger would immediately report to him according to their agreement. She actually called him a gorilla? Then let this guy see how big a gorilla's chest muscles were. Before leaving, Wang Ying swept Sun Yinger a glance. Sun Yinger shivered, and there was a feeling of death overflowing between her eyebrows. In a quiet room in the Divine Palace, Awan showed Lotus Sun and Sun Yinger some of the things she had collected over the years. There were magic treasures, elixirs and some beautiful clothes. These things were like treasures and each of them shone brightly. Some were rare treasures that Awan had obtained from her training, while others had been inherited from the old god. Now that the old god was dead, Awan still felt a little upset when she saw these things she had inherited from him. Awan, are you still thinking about the old god? Lotus Sun asked. She could actually sense that Awan and the old god had a very close relationship. But there was nothing she could do now. She could only step forward and gently put a hand on Awan's shoulder to comfort her. Although the old god did something terrible to me, I've always regarded her as a mother. But I've always seen her as my mother. Awan sighed. She opened a box and a golden feather appeared in front of the three girls. This feather was like a white flame, emitting light like the sun. After Awan poured her divine power into it, the whole feather seemed to be burning, shining with mysterious runes. It looked like a feather that was burning fiercely, but it gave off a cold fire that wasn't scalding. This cold fire had the power to freeze everything. Golden divine feather. Awan said, back then the old god found a treasure in order to freeze her appearance. She tried to use the golden divine feather to freeze her appearance, but unfortunately she couldn't reverse the rejuvenation of her body. These things are of great significance to you, right? Lotus Sun asked. Well, they used to be. But now, I think I should look forward. Awan smiled, her face flushed and she looked so cute that people wanted to kiss her. Rongrong and Ing, can choose any of these things. Huh? Is that okay? Why not? In my room, as long as you like it, you can have it. Of course, compared with what Ling Jinren gave you, these things might not be worth much, but they're still a token of my appreciation. Each of you has to choose at least one. Lotus Sun was a little hesitant. After all, she wasn't someone who liked to take advantage of others. But since Awan had said so, she had to give face to the world king of the god world. It was just that she was a little dazzled by the dazzling array of objects in front of her, and didn't know what to choose. Why not just pick something that doesn't look that valuable? What's this? Lotus Sun asked, pointing at an ugly little stone. Hey, Rongrong has a good eye. This is a holy moon stone. It can instantly help a spirit beast complete the next stage of evolution. Upgrade from 4th class to 3rd class. Upgrade from 3rd class to 2nd class. Awan gushed on. If it's a 1st class spirit beast, it can be upgraded to a holy beast. Holy beasts have been extinct for a long time, and there are less than 3 holy moonstones left in the universe. This is one of them. I'll change to something else. Lotus Sun was stupefied. She hadn't expected this stone to be so valuable. She cautiously scanned her surroundings. After all, she was the daughter of Huagua Water Curtain Group, and her ability to recognize things was almost innate. Wherever her eyes landed, there was definitely something valuable. This was actually one of the reasons why the old man had a good impression of Wang Ling. Because given his granddaughter's vision, if she really took a fancy to a boy, that boy would definitely have great potential. So even if Wang Ling's profile clearly stated that he was only at the foundation establishment stage, Old Man Sun didn't care at all. So what if he was at the foundation establishment stage? As long as it was a boy that his granddaughter took a fancy to, he would definitely become a true immortal in the future. After observing for a long time, Lotus Sun finally found something that was very familiar to her. This is a youth-retaining pill, right? She asked, pointing to a pink elixir. This elixir was placed in an unassuming jar, and was almost no different from the youth-retaining pills refined by Huagua Water Curtain Group. It wasn't strange for a girl's room to have youth-retaining pills. No, this is an ageless pill. It was refined with the soul power of my ageless soul. After eating it, you won't age for the rest of your life, said Awan. Won't age for the rest of your life? Yes, not for the rest of my life. Awan nodded affirmatively. But unfortunately, this ageless pill can't fulfill the old god's wish. Rongrong is an earthling and the ageless pill is perfect for you. With the old god's divine body, the ageless pill can't reverse the situation. I see. Lotus Sun nodded. But she still put the jar back in its place. Hey, doesn't Rongrong want to remain youthful for the rest of her life? Asked Awan. She actually didn't quite understand Lotus Sun's behavior. For a girl, appearance was always the most important thing. I think it's also a very happy thing to be able to grow old with the person you like. Lotus Sun shook her head and smiled. In any case, given classmate Wang Ling's strength, if he didn't want to grow old, he probably wouldn't, right? Awan. What's this? On the other side, Sun Yinger looked around the room for a long time, and finally found a green stick from a box under Ah Wan's bed. There were even bumps on the stick and it looked a little ugly and wretched. I remember now, this is the old god's thing. Ah Wan stared at the green stick for a long time, then said, "This seems to be the old god's favorite thing when he was alive. It's said to be used for massage?" Ah Wan actually didn't quite understand the use of this green stick. The main thing was that it was thick and short, and didn't look like the legendary jade dog beating stick. Thus, Ah Wan had thoughtfully hidden this stick, and hadn't expected Sun Yinger to find it. Your taste is too poor. Why do you keep looking for strange things?" Lotus Sun put her hand to her forehead. She could only say that this was indeed her shadow. "All right. I know Rongrong doesn't lack sticks," said Sun Yinger. "What nonsense are you talking about? Doesn't old man Sun have a stick passed down from generation to generation? He'll definitely pass it on to you in the future," said Sun Yinger. Realizing that she had tainted Sun Yinger's words, she couldn't help but blush. Sun Yinger chuckled and casually threw the stick on the bed. How could she not understand the meaning of her words? She had predicted that the other party would think that she had tainted her words. This was the highest level of teasing. "Ah Wan, you don't say. Your old god really has a lot of strange things." Sun Yinger found that she was getting a little addicted to flipping under the bed. "What is this?" Sun Yinger pointed at a black pill sealed in a medicine box and asked. "Lengthening pill," Ah Wan replied. Put it down?" she shouted. "What's that?" Sun Yinger had a look of disbelief on her face. When the old god and Tao ancestor were dating, they would sometimes feel lonely and write romance novels. "This pill is for short story writers to use. After taking it, their writing will become very long," Ah Wan explained. After explaining, Lotus Sun's face turned even redder. On the way back to Earth, the temperature on Lotus Sun's face never stopped. She suspected that Sun Yinger was doing this on purpose, purposely picking strange things to ask. After returning to Lotus Sun's bedroom, Sun Yinger was still snickering mischievously. What she loved the most was her Rongrong's bashful reactions. Those strange things the old god had left in Ah Wan's room were secondary. The most important thing was Rongrong's cute reactions. "What are you snickering about?" Lotus Sun felt that the corners of Sun Yinger's mouth had been curling up like crazy ever since she came back, and it had almost never stopped. "Sigh, nothing. He just felt that the black shorts were pretty good." "That's Tao ancestor Wang's underwear," Sun Yinger said with a look of pity. "What do I want Tao ancestor's underwear for?" Lotus Sun said angrily. In fact, neither Sun Yinger nor Lotus Sun had expected that the old god would even collect Tao ancestor's underwear. According to Ah Wan, wearing Tao ancestor Wang's underwear could make one's six senses calm and tranquil, as well as quell one's desires. And so, this pair of Tao ancestor Wang's underwear also had a nickname, Wang Chuchong. The scene turned awkward for a moment. In the end, Lotus Sun and Sun Yinger didn't choose anything, and Lotus Sun hurriedly pushed Sun Yinger back. If this girl was allowed to continue searching, who knew what other strange things she might unearth? Ah Wan also realized that the room was a little messy, so he agreed to leave the right to choose things for another time, and sent them back to Earth first. In the bedroom, Sun Yinger and Guyu leaned back on the sofa with a regretful expression on their faces. "Ai Rongrong. I still want that pair of underwear. Really? Look at that gorilla Wang Ying. If he had this thing on him, he wouldn't have gone overboard with me." As soon as she said this, she was swept away by a black shadow once again. This time, Lotus Sun didn't even have time to reply. Everything had happened too suddenly. Lotus Sun thought that Sun Yinger could change her nickname to Sun Anxiang. It was Monday, December 7th. It was the day number 60 high school resumed classes. When everyone arrived at number 60 high school, they were stunned by the towering school buildings and the wide school gates. The entirety of number 60 high school had been completely refurbished from the inside out. It was truly brand new and different from its previous appearance. Take that old, faded stone sculpture at the school gates for example. After being battered by countless elements, it had finally been retired, and Headmaster Chen had placed it in the school history exhibition hall. Now, the number 60 high school students were greeted at the gate every day by a golden statue of Audiobook, and it was designed to stand on a flying sword. It really gave people the feeling that a hero had arrived and that they were moving forward bravely. Looking at it from afar, it made people's blood boil. I heard that Senior Zhua's statue was already under construction a long time ago. It was originally made of gold sand. Now that our school has money, it's been changed to pure gold. Made of gold sand? Isn't that a sand sculpture? A lot of people in number 60 high school uniforms were discussing this at the school gates. It was the day number 60 high school resumed classes, and a lot of parents had personally come to take their children to school, mainly to see how the school environment had changed. Such a rich and overbearing change made the parents feel relieved. Now that the school had money, this pleasant learning environment would naturally give people a sense of comfort. On the other hand, the quality of the teachers would definitely be a level higher than before. A black commercial car drove past the school gates. Jiang Xiaoche was in the driver's seat and was about to unbuckle his seat belt, get out and open the door for Lotus Sunday. But the girl refused on the spot. "Brother Xiaoche, there's no need, I can do it myself. You don't need to get out of the car to help me in the future." Jiang Xiaoche frowned. "But that's against the rules. Rules are made by people. I now feel that there's no harm in keeping a low profile." Lotus Sun smiled. She directly opened the door and got out of the car, then followed the people around her into the school. Jiang Xiaoche gnashed his teeth at this scene. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he watched the girl enter the school surrounded by a group of people. Only then did he drive away. At a corner, Jiang Xiaoche took out his phone and began to lay out a battle plan. "Is everything ready?" A deep male voice swiftly came from the other end of the phone. "Everything is ready. On the way home from school today, everything will be carried out according to Brother Jiang's instructions." "Good." Jiang Xiaoche nodded. Chapter 1392. The first day number 60 high school resumed classes meant that Wang Ling wouldn't have to take online classes, wouldn't have to record learning videos at home, and wouldn't have to receive messages every morning from Old Pan calling out names online and publicly punishing those who hadn't handed in their homework. He thought his life was finally back on track. But it turned out that the trouble was far more than that. The night before school resumed, Wang Ling's eyelids began to twitch regularly. It wasn't a particularly high-level alarm. But this was clearly a bad warning. After experiencing so many incidents, Wang Ling's eyelid warning now had a whole new understanding of the level of trouble, and wouldn't easily trigger a warning for small troubles. Unless something explosive was going to happen next, big trouble on the first day of school? As expected of myself. Wang Ling mused in his heart. Number 60 High School's main gate. Wang Ling saw number 60 High School's new look, and it was indeed a lot more luxurious than he had imagined. The statue of Audiobook standing on a flying sword in front of the gate startled Wang Ling, for no other reason than that its posture was too silly. Wang Ling remembered how Audiobook had proudly explained the statue's black technology to him last night. It was said that the pendulum clock in number 60 High School's teaching building had merged with Audiobook's statue. Audiobook stood on the flying sword, the tip of the sword aimed at the hour hand, while his right hand held the second and minute hands, so the entire statue's posture would constantly change as time passed. Of course, the funniest thing was at noon and midnight. An opening would automatically open at the crotch of Audiobook's statue, and a golden pendulum would descend from inside to swing between its thighs. Walking along the school square in the direction of the teaching building, Wang Ling saw a lot of students lining up on both sides of the school square. Super Chin and Hero Gua, these two buffoons, were impressively at the end of the line. "Wang Ling," Hero Gua called out from afar. The little fatty had clearly neglected to exercise during this period of time at home, and Wang Ling felt that Hero Gua seemed to have put on a lot of weight. In fact, Wang Ling himself had also put on weight. Fortunately, he had already used the big fat spell to rub off the fat, and now stored it in the king's eye space in case he needed it. Wang Ling didn't know what the two of them were lining up for, so he walked over to take a look. He probably wasn't the kind of person who liked doing good things. But he couldn't resist Super Chin and Hero Gua's enthusiastic greetings, and it would be impolite if he didn't respond. "Why do I feel like you have dark circles under your eyes? You look like you haven't woken up yet. If I didn't know better, I'd think you were saving the world again at home." Super Chin took the initiative to put his arm around Wang Ling's shoulder. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. He knew Super Chin was joking. In this day and age, dark eye circles were the bane of his reputation. How would he dare to show them again? It was true that he didn't sleep well. It wasn't because he didn't get enough sleep that his mental state wasn't good. On the other hand, it was because of his dead fish eyes. This kind of eye shape always gave people the feeling that he didn't sleep enough. On the other hand, yesterday's sudden eyelid warning had scared Wang Ling so much. However, it was obvious that the eyelid warning was not referring to the current situation. "Our school is really rich now. There's even a teleportation array in the school square," Hero Gua explained to Wang Ling, This is specially made for students who are late. It's open 24 hours a day, and all the information has already been entered into the back end of the school array control system. As long as you enter the school square, you'll be able to directly step into the transmission array and be transported to your classroom. It can teleport up to 10 people at a time. Wang Ling nodded. He finally understood. This was the legendary welfare of lazy people. But they actually didn't need to use this kind of array at all since they were already in the classroom on the first floor. It would be a lot faster to walk there than to queue up for the teleportation array. It's our first time, so let's experience it. The main thing is that our school's facilities are much bigger now, and the teaching buildings are much wider. For a moment, some people can't figure out where their classrooms are, Super Chin said. Very soon it was their turn. Hirogu put his arm around Wang Ling and Super Chen's shoulders as they walked in together. Wait for me. At that moment, Little Peanut hurriedly rushed over and caught the last bus. Before he was teleported, he bowed and apologized to the people behind him. Sorry? We're in the same class. The schoolmates still in line didn't mind too much. There was a buzz. Wang Ling and the others appeared at the door of Grade 1, Class 3. It was a classroom on the far right of Teaching Block 1. And then there was smoke started to rise from the school square. The teleportation array which Wang Ling had just used was broken on the spot. Hirogu, what's going on? We just finished using it and it broke? Super Chin, it must have been used too often because this array is meant for people who are about to be late. It can teleport up to 10 people at a time and we've only used 4. It's not like it's overloaded. Unless there's someone weighing more than 1,000 gene. Wang Ling, after returning to the classroom without a hitch, Little Peanut started to collect homework. Because it was done online, he collected USB drives this time. So far, apart from the teleportation array outside, there didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary, but Wang Ling was still very vigilant. When it came to collect Wang Ling's USB drive, Little Peanut said, Wang Ling, it looks like there's something in your locker. Of all the lockers, yours is the only one that's lit up. Locker? Wang Ling was startled. It's a new facility the school added and everyone has one. It seems that the school distributes benefits on holidays and festivals into these lockers for everyone to pick up. Our class picks up stuff next door and it's merged with class 2. Little Peanut pointed in a direction. It's so early in the morning, who would stuff things into your storage box? Hirogu was curious and snorted. Could it be a love letter? I don't think it's very likely. Super Chin raised his eyebrows, and his tone involuntarily turned sour. Last semester, Wang Ling didn't receive a single love letter. It's most likely someone's prank. Wang Ling was silent. Now, it seemed that the contents of the storage box were indeed the prank love letter that someone had delivered. Fortunately, he had a habit of arriving at school early. Since there weren't many people around, he should hurry up and take it out. Wang Ling hurriedly got up and went to the locker next door to look for the box. As Su Xiao had said, his was the only one with a red light and he could find it at a glance. Hirogu and Super Chin followed behind him to join in the fun. The default password is 4 zeros. Wang Ling, hurry up and open it. Hirogu looked like he was watching a good show. Wang Ling entered the password. There was a ding. A pile of envelopes sealed with love stickers fell out of the box with a crash, and instantly reached Wang Ling's knees. Lotus Sun, who was passing by, happened to see this scene. Chapter 1393. There were all kinds of love letters and there were more than 100 of them. Hirogu, Super Chin and the others followed behind to help Wang Ling tidy up. When they were tidying up, some of the letters weren't glued together, and the paper inside fell out, giving Hirogu a chance to gossip. For a moment, the people in the storeroom at the back became onlookers. Dear classmate Wang, Hirogu lifted his head after reading a letter and was startled. F***K. It was really written for Wang Ling? He continued to read, Classmate Wang, I've admired you for a long time. When I think of your strong physique, I can't sleep at night. Do you remember you once looked back and smiled at me? Wang Ling looked back and smiled. Super Chin laughed foolishly. As expected, it was a prank. How could Wang Ling look back and smile at someone? They might not all be pranks. There are so many and the handwriting is different. Hirogu casually opened the rest of the letters and started to read. Classmate Wang. I really like you. Can I be your girlfriend? I'm very cute. Classmate Wang, even if we're not in the same school, I always believe in what a certain cartoon says. Yearning will cross time and space to bring me to your side. Classmate Wang, I don't know what style you like, but I can change for you. I've been eating papaya every day recently. Classmate Wang. I heard you like fair-skinned girls, so I use a cucumber mask every day for you. A lot of girls in our class are fighting to imitate me, and the price of cucumbers in the market has gone up because of you. Wang Ling, Hero Guo and Super Chin. Hero Guo was so scared that he dropped the letters on the spot. In these letters, Lola's mature sisters, salty and sweet, there were all kinds of girls. Inside and outside school, hospitals, internet cafes, and all kinds of work units. There are even girls outside school, and there are even female university students who are already working. Before Hero Guo could shout at the top of his lungs, Super Chen and Little Peanut covered his mouth. Are you crazy? Why are you shouting so loudly? Super Chen hinted at the door with his eyes. There was no one there, but the three of them were well aware that Lotus Sun was on the side. Because there were so many letters, they did not know whether they were real or fake. There was definitely an element of mischief in it, but if there was a real confession letter, it would be a disaster if it wasn't handled properly. Anyway, what we can confirm now is that there's definitely no one in our class. I know the handwriting of the girls in our class. Su Xiao said. He was the commissary in charge of studies, so he came into contact with everyone's homework almost every day. He was very confident in recognizing handwriting. It wasn't that there weren't other girls in class who liked Wang Ling. The main thing was that Lotus Sun was here. Furthermore, Lotus Sun had publicly confessed to Wang Ling a long time ago, and no one was willing to offend that rich young lady. There are too many letters, and I think it's very difficult for Wang Ling himself. I think I'll handle this matter. At that moment, Super Chin stepped forward and volunteered. Wang Ling was startled and thought he had heard wrong. These letters might be half true and half false. If you throw them all away, you'll definitely be criticized if you're discovered. If you accept it, some girls might misunderstand that you are interested in them. So Wang Ling, just pretend you don't know about this, Super Chin said. As a man who had received love letters in junior high, Super Chin seemed to be very experienced in dealing with this kind of situation. He reached out and patted Wang Ling on the shoulder. We're all good brothers. Leave it to me. His unswerving eyes revealed his strong conviction. Overall, Wang Ling felt that Super Chin was a reliable man. Furthermore, he had never expected Super Chin to actually choose this time to help him. What a good brother. Wang Ling looked back at him gratefully. Finally, he hadn't cultivated a relationship with his classmates for nothing. But somehow Wang Ling felt that this matter wasn't as simple as it seemed. Elsewhere, just before school ended, Jiang Xiaoche received a piece of news. According to his original plan, he had hired a group of thugs from the underworld. The one with the highest realm was a nascent soul cultivator who was nicknamed Old Gray. Old Gray, along with a dozen or so golden core cultivators, planned to surround Wang Ling and Lotus Sun on the way back from school. Hiring such a large group of people had cost Jiang Xiaoche a lot. 2 years of his salary had been wiped out overnight. But he didn't feel bad about it. All of this was for the sake of capturing Lotus Sun, and then tying her to his belt forever. In the end, just before school ended, Old Gray received information about love letters. What? You're saying that Wang Ling has received a lot of love letters? Is this information reliable? Jiang Xiaoche asked. Very reliable, Brother Jiang. I also spent money to hire students to spy on him, and I heard that Miss Sun was depressed all day. Old Gray replied, Of course, I heard that some of the love letters were mischievous, but there were so many that some of them were real. Also, the love letters were written to all sorts of girls both inside and outside the school. Then what about these love letters? Jiang Xiaoche's interest was piqued. These love letters were the key. If you, Wang Ling, hadn't flirted with women everywhere, how could you have gotten so many love letters? Since these love letters were the key evidence, he had to get his hands on them. When the time came, Old Man Sun would have to believe them even if he didn't want to. These love letters seem to be in the hands of a person called Super Chin who has a pretty good relationship with Wang Ling. It seems that he intends to help Wang Ling get rid of these love letters, Old Gray said. Jiang Xiaoche nodded. Then after school, send another group of people to snatch these love letters back. Understood. In a van on the side of the street, Old Gray nodded and hung up. Sitting in the front passenger seat, he called out to the people behind him. Brothers, did you hear what Brother Jiang said? Since you did, let's take action. Yes, the people in the back replied. A whole car full of people. Invisibility talismans stuck on their bodies and armed with steel pipes, broadswords and all kinds of dangerous controlled weapons, they jumped out of the car one after another. These weapons looked very dangerous, but in fact they had been specially made. They just looked scary. Jiang Shaoche might have been fooling around, but he was in fact still afraid of hurting Lotus Sunday. Thus, these weapons were special props for filming blockbusters. They looked dangerous, but in fact when you really hit them you wouldn't feel any pain at all. And so, on this day after school at number 60 high school, a miraculous scene unfolded. Super Chin, who was about to leave the school gates to deal with the love letters, was immediately targeted by Old Gray's group. Lotus Sun had seen Old Gray's group again. Behind them were Wang Zhen and Fang Xing. And then Wang Ling, he was at the very back of everyone else. In the morning he had actually already guessed who on earth was behind the prank love letters. But now these two werewolves had already jumped out. Wang Ling was puzzled and didn't understand what on earth Wang Zhen and Fang Xing's goal was. Could it be that they were so bored that they wanted to observe Lotus Sun's reaction? In any case, Wang Ling already knew. These love letters had originally been written for Wang Zhen. Then, if he intercepted them and gave them to Lu Qingyi, what kind of miraculous chemical reaction would happen? Kneeling on a durian was unavoidable. Chapter 1394. As soon as they left the school gate, Lotus Sun noticed a suspicious group of people following Super Chin. These people were furtively wearing invisibility talismans, but this level of invisibility was already completely exposed to Mysterious C's Sword Chi. Mysterious C's Sword Chi was like a radar that could easily scan the average invisible unit. At first, she didn't know that this group of people had also come for the love letters Super Chin was carrying. It wasn't until Mysterious C used his Sword Chi to draw the secret conversation of the trackers into her ears that Lotus Sun confirmed the other party's objective. Be careful, there are still a lot of people around. Don't make a move now. There's a dark alley up ahead. There's an opportunity there. Our team's mission is just the love letters. Got it? Just grab the love letters and knock them out. Yes. Hearing this, Lotus Sun was completely stupefied. Forget about men who snatched men from women these days. But there were actually men who snatched love letters from women? Had he been single for so long that he could read love letters with delicate features? Lotus Sun felt that there was something strange about the entire love letter incident. She knew that someone had to be playing a prank behind the scenes in these hundreds of love letters, but what if some of them were real? Thus, after struggling for an entire day, Lotus Sun still decided to split her attention to investigate. In addition, the young girl had also keenly captured one thing from the conversation just now. That was what one of them had said about our team's mission. Did that mean that there was actually a second and third team plotting something else? It seemed that this was a premeditated operation. This group's goal might not just be the love letters. At that moment, the young girl suddenly thought of something very scary. Could it be that someone had hidden some important information in these love letters? She thought of the common plot lines in movies and TV dramas. In order to ensure that no evidence of their crimes was left behind, a group of vicious criminals would use primitive methods to transmit information and communicate code words, and then plan a terrorist attack. Today was number 60 High's first day back at school. There had to be a problem with this suspicious group of people appearing at this time. Moreover, one of the teleportation arrays in the school square was broken this morning. That was a newly built array. Who the hell knew if this group had done it? No, we have to stop these people. Lotus Sun had originally been after Super Chen's love letter. As a result, after following them all the way here, she noticed this group of suspicious people. Lotus Sun felt that if she didn't do anything, the situation might develop in an even more serious direction. Wasn't classmate Ling's purpose in upgrading her spirit sword so that she could protect herself, protect her friends and companions, and uphold justice in a timely manner? Wang Ling, behind her. Fang Xing, Wang Zhen and Wang Ling at the back couldn't help gaping. After they used the mind-reading technique to listen to the girl's thoughts, their facial expressions and movements could be said to be the same, and they all looked stunned. It could only be said that Lotus Sun was truly Lotus Sun. He had only walked less than 100 meters out of the school gate, but he had already made up the script in his head. At that moment, he lowered his head and put his hands in his trouser pockets as he walked forward, pretending that nothing had happened. The other group that Lotus Sun was talking about was in fact right behind him. They were also wearing invisibility talismans and were moving stealthily, but the leader was very cautious. Old Gray was following behind them with the other group. Although he had already confirmed Wang Ling and Lotus Sun's position, he hadn't found a suitable opportunity to make a move. He looked around vigilantly, sweat beading on his forehead. These idiots, do they think they'll be fine just because they put on invisibility talismans? They don't even know they've been discovered. It could only be said that in the end Old Gray was Old Gray. In any case, he was a nascent soul expert, and had long since sensed that their operation had been exposed. They'd been exposed? No way. Aren't the enemies we're dealing with only at the Foundation establishment stage? The invisibility talisman that Brother Jiang gave us is top-notch. Anyone below the nascent soul stage won't be able to see through it, said one of the underlings. For this operation, Jiang Shaoche had even spent a lot of money to prepare props. He was the Chief Secretary General of Huagua Water Curtain Group and Old Man Sun's personal figure. How could he use street stall goods to support this operation? I don't know what's going on either. Old Gray was also very puzzled. Who the hell knew how a Foundation establishment cultivator could be so good at distinguishing things? On the contrary, these golden core and nascent soul thugs were like street stall goods. They had also cultivated step by step to get to where they were now. At that moment, Old Gray was very depressed. They were all people who had made mistakes when they were young and had criminal records. Thus, even if they had high realms, no company would dare hire them. Nowadays, even moving bricks at construction sites required criminal records. Thus, Old Gray could only take the lead in this kind of business and join the loyalty team. It sounded like a triad, but in fact, it was a social and emotional organization that specialized in testing the feelings between men and women. Although they were called thugs, they actually hadn't really hit anyone since they turned over a new leaf, and were only acting as thugs. What should we do? Miss Sun has already sensed them. Should we call off the operation? Someone asked. Old Gray was also conflicted about this question. Ever since they had joined the loyalty team, they had never failed a mission before. The number of scumbags who had fully exposed their true nature under their deliberate intimidation was innumerable. It wasn't that there were no couples who chose to protect each other and face danger together in the face of danger. But based on the cases Old Gray had participated in, when their lives were in danger, most people would choose to push the people around them out and run away alone. According to Jiang Shaoche's original plan, Old Gray and the others had planned to record Wang Ling's reaction after they attacked Lotus Sunday. But now the team that had gone to snatch the love letter had been exposed. It seemed that they couldn't continue with the mission. But Old Gray felt that this might be a good opportunity. Because snatching the love letter wasn't the main objective to begin with. Miss Sun's attention is now on the team in front of us, so I think it's the right time to act. At that moment, Old Gray grit his teeth and took out a purple reagent from his Chengkuan bag. "What's this?" asked one of his lackeys next to him. This wasn't supposed to be a prop for this operation, but in order to ensure the success of the operation, Old Gray decided to use it from his collection. This is fear water. When you throw it on the ground, the fear gas inside will quickly evaporate. Within a radius of 500 meters, the weaker party will be more afraid of the stronger party. It's the best tool to test those scumbags. The greater the gap in their realms, the stronger the fear effect, and in severe cases, they'll directly go into shock. Is that useful? But it only lasts for 3 minutes, so we have to make it quick. After saying that, Old Gray, who was following behind Wang Ling, immediately threw the reagent on the ground. The gas evaporated continuously. When Old Gray and his lackey saw Wang Ling's back, they suddenly felt like they were going to have a heart attack. Chapter 1395. A strong sense of discomfort spread through the hearts of Old Gray and the lackeys behind him. Their faces swiftly turned white, and they started to have difficulty breathing. Old Gray didn't know what on earth was going on, let alone why a Foundation establishment youngster's back looked so terrifying. In the eyes of Old Gray and the others, Wang Ling was now a ferocious prehistoric beast baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Was this the legendary back shadow kill? In a split second, the dozen or so invisible units behind Wang Ling, led by Old Gray, all fell to the ground. Old Gray struggled on the ground, then completely lost consciousness and fell into a temporary state of shock. The battle was already over before it had even started. The gas emitted by the water of fear was colorless and odorless, and wasn't easy to detect. But even Old Gray himself couldn't have imagined this. In addition to having a terrifying back, the contestant in front of him was also a walking air purifier. Before the gas emitted by the water of fear could completely diffuse through the air, Wang Ling had already inhaled it and purified it completely. Wang Ling's ability to purify his body was unimaginable. Otherwise, with the power of the water of fear, who knew how many people within a radius of 500 meters would have fainted? Wang Zhen and Fang Xing followed behind Lotus Sunday. They were sure that she had already sensed the invisible units in front of them. Dual Mysterious Sea is indeed amazing. I feel like I'm no match for her now. Wang Jin swallowed. He could already feel the terror of mysterious sea sword chi from several bodies away. And this was just the normal flow of sword chi. It was like a bottle of perfume that emitted a fragrance into the surroundings. Lotus Sun hadn't released mysterious sea sword chi at all, but its aura was already very terrifying. Is this the most powerful foundation establishment cultivator? Very strong indeed. Fang Xing rubbed his chin and said meaningfully, let's retreat. Now that Lotus Sun had become stronger, they might be exposed if they continued to follow her. Didn't you want to observe classmate Sun's reaction? Wang Jin asked telepathically. That's enough. It looks like she cares a lot. Otherwise she wouldn't have followed him right after school, said Fang Xing. They had chosen to follow Lotus Sun earlier because they wanted to see her reaction, but also because they had noticed a group of suspicious people wearing invisibility talismans. As a core member of Battle Sect, Lotus Sun was like a younger sister to Wang Zhen, and Fang Xing worried that something might happen. They followed behind Lotus Sunday. But now, after truly sensing the terrifying sword chi released by the mysterious sea powder, Fang Xing felt that it was no longer necessary. To use a classic movie line, Lotus Sun could now put her hands on her hips and shout, I want to fight 10. However, it was judged according to the actual situation. With this kind of combat power, even if there were hundreds of millions of golden core cultivators, it would still be useless. Sure enough, Wang Zhen and Fang Xing had only taken a few steps down the other path. There was movement in the dark alley. Lotus Sun stepped into the dark alley and released powerful sword chi. Boom. A huge pressure descended from the sky, instantly shaking the members of the loyalty team, causing them to foam at the mouth and fall to the ground. Student Lotus Sun? Why are you here? Chinda was shocked. He had no idea what was going on. He heard the sound of someone falling to the ground behind him. When he turned around, he saw Lotus Sun standing behind him. Super Chin, I'm sorry. Super Chin had no idea what was going on at all when Lotus Sun swiftly knocked him out with a karate chop. Lotus Sun had held back, and her palm was covered with a trace of mysterious sea sword chi, which was enough to knock Super Chin out. The girl's actions were clean and decisive, without the slightest bit of hesitation. In almost the blink of an eye, all these people with invisibility talismans had been knocked out by Lotus Sun's sword chi. She collected all the love letters, then helped the unconscious Super Chin to one side before calling Jiang Xiaoche. When Jiang Xiaoche received Lotus Sun's message, he thought that his plan had succeeded, and was overjoyed. Miss, what's wrong? Did you run into some trouble? Yes. Very troublesome. Lotus Sun thought for a bit, then nodded. The main thing is that a lot of people fainted. What? Jiang Xiaoche was stupefied. There was a group of golden core criminals following my classmates. I don't know what happened, but they all seem to have fainted. Before they wake up, Brother Xiaoche, hurry over and take care of it. Also, that classmate of mine called Super Chin also fainted. Remember to take him home, said Lotus Sunday. After hanging up, little friend Jiang Xiaoche had a lot of question marks in his heart. And so, on the first day number 60 high school went back to school, it was on the news. It wasn't because of number 60 high school's renovation. The content of the news broadcast was mainly related to a car accident in front of number 60 high school. When Wang Ling watched the news, he felt that the female anchor was holding back her laughter as she reported the incident. The female anchor. A car accident happened in front of number 60 high school in Peiyuan District, Songhai City. 14 men with invisibility talismans and special movie props in their hands lay neatly on the road in front of number 60 high school. Parents who were driving their children to and from school couldn't avoid them in time and ran over them. Please read the interview in detail. On TV, a female reporter gave Old Gray a microphone. May I ask who you are? Why did you appear in front of the school with invisibility talismans on? We are members of the film crew. We forgot to take off the talismans on our way home after filming, and then we fainted from exhaustion. Old Gray explained with quick wits. His face and body were covered in wheel marks. More than a dozen cars had run over him. If it wasn't for his realm foundation, he would probably have already become minced meat. As for the golden core cultivators behind him, they weren't so lucky. Like Old Gray, they had been forced to suffer the experience of being repeatedly run over by cars. It was just that they weren't unscathed like Old Gray. Apart from the wheel marks on their bodies, most of them had broken bones. It had been many years since he had joined the loyalty squad. Although Old Ash had the experience of laughing and joking with the squad members and cracking dirty jokes, he had never experienced it before. It was just that he had never thought that one day there would really be a car running over his face. This was a real car running over his face. 2F*** King Unlucky. At the same time, in the top floor office of Huagua Water Curtain Group, Sunny Yuan received a report from Jiang Xiaoche. Rongrong was attacked by a group of people with invisibility talismans on her way home from school, and then they inexplicably fainted? Sunny Yuan put down the newspaper with a serious expression on his face. Yes. Jiang Xiaoche nodded. Although Miss was scared but not hurt, that classmate Wang Ling actually just watched from behind during the whole process. He didn't do anything at all. That's really too much. Xiaoche, it's not that I want to criticize you, but your hostility towards classmate Wang seems a little obvious. Old man Sun rolled his eyes and said, You already said that this group of people had invisibility talismans on them. He's only at the foundation establishment stage, how could he know that someone was planning to attack Rongrong? The logic was clear and organized, and Jiang Xiaoche instantly felt that he couldn't refute it. After saying this, old man Sun smiled. They say that classmate Wang is a mascot and it's true. Look, Rongrong was supposed to be in danger, but Wang Ling just happened to be behind her. In the end, Wang Ling just happened to be behind her. Didn't he indirectly help Rongrong avert danger? I never thought that classmate Wang would have a good wife constitution. Jiang Xiaoche was stupefied. What F*** King good wife? However, he still wasn't convinced. But I heard that he received a lot of love letters today. How many? More than 100. That's just like me back then. Even when I received thousands of letters back then, I wasn't as surprised as you are. A lot means that he's charming. This indirectly proves that Rongrong's taste is indeed good. In the bedroom, Lotus Sun dumped all the love letters on her bed. Sun Yinger was shocked. So many love letters. Can you read them all, Rongrong? You still have the task of retrieving the Rubik's Cube tonight? Sitting upright on the bed with her arms crossed, she took a deep breath and said resolutely, Investigate. Loopy Toad will be here in half an hour. Read as many as you can. Chapter 1396. Jiang Xiaoche had realized a very serious problem. All along, it seemed that everything he had done to target Wang Ling had been an assist. Of course, he felt that he couldn't be entirely blamed for this. The main thing was that old man Sun's fandom filter was too strong, and he could even imagine something as magical as a wife who brings good fortune. For all, what the hell was this? After returning home, Jiang Xiaoche opened a bottle of champagne and poured it into a goblet to relieve stress. He had planned to drown his sorrows, but the more he thought about it, the more aggrieved he became. There was a crack. He used all his strength and the goblet in his hand was actually crushed. You've got guts, Wang Ling. When it comes to picking up girls, I, Jiang Xiaoche, will call you number one. As a man with dignity, he wouldn't give up on pursuing Lotus Sunday. At the same time, as a big pig trotter, he also needed to relieve stress for himself. Jiang Yingying, who looked very much like Lotus Sun, had been on his mind the last time he hadn't been able to ask her out. In any case, he had nothing else to do now, so he turned his attention back to Jiang Yingying. Big sis, wanna ask her out? Jiang Xiaoche changed to a new WeChat account and tried to add her as a friend. A few seconds later, there was the sound of a cell phone being smashed. He had been blacklisted by Jiang Yingying again. This was simply the standard ending. On the other side, Jiang Xiaoche was very gloomy. On the other side, in Lotus Sun's room, she was also very gloomy. The two girls sat on the bed and checked the letters one by one. Sun Yinger summoned a few of her clones to help her check them, and after reading less than 20 letters, she felt tired. Wang Ying had just trained her on the moon yesterday, and she still hadn't recovered yet. Furthermore, because Lotus Sun had been on a mission to retrieve the Rubik's Cube, her training schedule had been changed at the last minute. It used to be that she would report to the moon at 8 o'clock sharp every night. Now, it had been changed to 2 hours a day at random intervals. She remembered that she still had to write her daily self-reflection. At that moment, she still had to divert her attention to help her Rongrong check the love letters. Sun Yinger felt like the heroine in a tragedy. It was really too miserable. After a preliminary screening based on Lotus Sun standards, she had already eliminated more than 60% of the more than 100 love letters. Some looked like pranks, while others were directly removed from the list of competitors, based on the handwriting alone. I think the expression of this letter is quite sincere. Why did Rongrong remove it just based on the handwriting? Sun Yinger frowned and couldn't help but ask. The content is really good. The language is rich and full and the wording is gorgeous and touching. But it's a pity that the words are round. This girl probably doesn't manage her weight well. I don't think classmate Wang Ling will like this kind of chubby girl. Lotus Sun buried her head in the letter and said with a serious expression, "In addition, this girl's writing is too heavy, which proves that she usually has a fiery temper." But the words she expressed were full of delicacy, to use 4 words to describe it: duplicity. Sun Yinger swallowed a mouthful of saliva. When a woman was serious, the smell of gunpowder was too strong. Although there was not a single dirty word in her words, it still made Sun Yinger feel a dangerous atmosphere. The girl had been wearing this expression ever since she started checking the letter. It was as if she had changed into another person and had no intention of relaxing. Sun Yinger had wanted to tease Lotus Sun a little, but Lotus Sun seemed to be immune to it. When Rongrong was serious, it was really scary. "Rongrong, what are you going to do with these girls? Are you going to catch them and throw them into the river?" Sun Yinger asked, trembling. "We're living in a society ruled by law. How could I do this kind of underworld business?" Hearing this, Lotus Sun fell into deep thought. After a long silence, she said cautiously, "It depends." "Such as?" "Introduce them to a new boyfriend or give them enough money to send them abroad. In any case, at their age, they just want something fresh," Lotus Sun said. "You don't want something fresh?" Sun Yinger asked. Lotus Sun raised her head at this question, and she looked at Sun Yinger with a very firm expression. "I'm not. I know, Rongrong." Sun Yinger had just mentioned it casually, and hadn't expected Lotus Sun to answer her so seriously. In half an hour, with the help of Sun Yinger and her split body, Lotus Sun successfully sifted through all the letters. In the end, there were only 9 love letters left. "Should I ask the old man to check them?" Sun Yinger asked. "No need. Grandpa would laugh at me." Lotus Sun shook her head. At that moment, Loopy Toad's voice came from outside her bedroom door. "Did I interrupt your census?" It had been directly teleported here by Lord Ma, and landed in front of Lotus Sun's door. "Come in." Just as Lotus Sun thought of Loopy Toad, it appeared. She was puzzled. "How did you know what I was doing?" "The fly at number 60 High's door told me. This king is very well informed now." Loopy Toad smiled. The demon world of the human world wasn't nearly as satisfying as the big meat flies of the demon world. Since it was tasteless, it was better to use it instead. This was Loopy Toad's Human World Flies Incorporation plan. You actually control an intelligence network of flies. Lotus Sun felt as if her horizons had been broadened. "It's nothing." Loopy Toad chuckled and looked at Sun Yinger. "Don't forget, you still owe me 20 sacks of big meat flies." Sun Yinger, she had almost forgotten that she actually had this assignment. Chapter 1397. After Loopy Toad's reminder, Lotus Sun finally realized the blind spot she had when examining the letters. All the letters here seemed to have classmate Wang written on them. What was strange was that there was a strange gap between the word Wang and student in many of the letters. If these letters hadn't been written to Wang Ling in the first place, then everything now seemed to make sense. Brother Wang Zhen's letters? But why would he do that? Lotus Sun was full of doubts, but after learning the whole story, her mood was indeed a lot better. "It's probably just a simple prank to see your reaction." Loopy Toad hit the nail on the head. "My reaction?" Lotus Sun sighed in her heart. It was too difficult for her. Chasing after Wang Ling was already difficult enough. She also had to be teased by these seniors in the cultivation world. "So does Sister Chingy know about this?" Lotus Sun asked. "Probably not," said Loopy Toad. Lotus Sun's expression was calm as she gave a kind smile. "Then I think it's necessary for her to know." Loopy Toad, Lotus Sun, so now there's only one person left. Loopy Toad was puzzled. "What one person?" Lotus Sun, now I know that the letters addressed to classmate Wang were all written for brother Wang Zhen. That can already be ruled out. Then there's only one letter left. There's actually a real love letter? Loopy Toad and Sun Yinger were blank when they heard this. It's written classmate Wang Ling. Moreover, this was the main target of my 9 letters. Lotus Sun pulled out this letter with a pink cover from the other 9 letters and said, "Do you need me to help you find it?" "No need," this girl even wrote down the address and signature. Lotus Sun frowned slightly. "Her name is Jiang Yingying." Jiang Yingying? Loopy Toad felt that this girl's name was a little familiar, as if it had heard it somewhere before. It felt that this matter had become a little complicated, Let's collect the Rubik's Cube first. In any case, there's only one opponent. When I come back, I'll meet her myself. Lotus Sun smiled. From the original 9 opponents to just 1 opponent, the burden in the girl's heart was indeed lifted a lot. Then where's the 3rd Rubik's Cube? Sun Yinger asked. Sword King Realm. Loopy Toad raised its head and looked at Lotus Sunday. I heard that this is where Lord Jinko was born. Back then, in order to collect the Sword King ancient pillars, Tyrant had repeatedly barged into the Sword King world. That was an extremely dangerous secret realm in the universe. The location was in the eastern district of the Milky Way. There was a sword storm outside the Sword King realm, and it was accompanied by a strong gravitational force. If one's cultivation was insufficient, they would be immediately sucked in and turned into dust. Therefore, overall, the difficulty of this mission was no easier than the previous one. It was far more dangerous than Divine Tao Star. However, the main danger was focused on breaking through from the outside. As long as he could successfully break through the Blade Storm, it would be much easier to move around in the Sword King realm. At the same time, in order to ensure that the operation went smoothly, another core member of the war sect helped out. Lady Bai Qiao, you can come out now, Loopy Toad shouted as it looked out the window. With a flash of a brown sword, a white-haired otaku with headphones around her neck appeared in front of everyone. She was still wearing the iconic pajamas of the fire-breathing dragon. Senior Bai Qiao. Lotus Sun greeted. Bai Qiao's face was a little red. Hurry up and get to work. I specially took the time to help you. I hope you'll be quick at retrieving the Rubik's Cube and don't be clumsy and waste time. Not only wasn't Lotus Sun angry in the face of such a poisonous tongue, she even thought the girl in front of her was a little cute. That was Bai Qiao's personality to begin with. Lotus Sun remembered Audiobook telling her about his experience looking for Bai Qiao in the past. At that time, Bai Qiao had verbally attacked everyone, not even Wang Ling. So it was fine as long as one understood Bai Qiao's words the other way around. Lord Ma has never been inside the Sword King world, so he could only teleport us to the outskirts. Breaking through the Blade Storm will be difficult, but I think Lady Bai Qiao has already thought of a way, right? Loopy Toad wagged its tail as it did its best to talk to Bai Qiao in a pleasant manner. It actually didn't like Bai Qiao's personality very much, but for Jinka's sake, Loopy Toad had to give her some face. A bunch of good-for-nothings. Bai Qiao snorted, then transformed into a scabbard. After a flash of light, the small scabbard gradually grew larger, and then turned into a small immortal warship the size of a sports car. Fortunately, Lotus Sun's bedroom was spacious enough. Even with the addition of a small immortal warship, it didn't feel crowded. You can actually do this? This was Loopy Toad's first time seeing a scabbard like this, and it was instantly amazed. This is the skin transformation spell, Bai Qiao said. When playing games, sometimes it didn't matter if your skills weren't good, but your skin had to look good. As a veteran otaku, Bai Qiao had done a lot of research on her scabbard skin, so she would often use the skin transformation spell, inspired by the game, to make her look even more gorgeous. Although Bai Qiao now looked like a small immortal warship, she was in fact still a scabbard, and there was a slot at the end of the immortal warship for a sword to be inserted. This Galaxy Magic Mecha skin had been inspired by Bai Qiao after playing automatic chess recently. Even Bai Qiao herself hadn't expected it to come in handy so soon. Sitting on the immortal warship, the genuine leather sofa inside made Lotus Sun feel very comfortable. Senior Bai Qiao is amazing. Do I need you to tell me that? Bai Qiao sounded a little pleased with herself. Then let's go. As soon as she said that, Lord Ma's golden teleportation light fell from the sky on time to transport everyone to the outside of Sword King World's universe secret land in the eastern part of the Milky Way. In the Wang family's small villa, Wang Ling sensed Loopy Toad, Lotus Sun and Bai Qiao's auras disappear from Earth, and immediately knew that they had already begun the retrieval mission. Swordmaster Bai Qiao, is it really okay? On the side, Jinka couldn't help asking. Wang Ling stretched out his hand and rubbed Jinka's soft white hair. Actually, he could feel Jinka's worry. Although Sword King World was indeed his hometown, it was really too chaotic. Since ancient times, countless spirit swords had been born in Sword King World, and from the moment they were born, they had done everything they could to escape that place. Trillions of spirit swords had struggled endlessly over thousands of years as they tried to break out of the encirclement. In the end, they had failed and turned into sword graves in Sword King World. Jinka remembered that it had taken him a long time to break through Sword King World back then. About a week? He had used his sword chi to create an opening, and had successfully escaped the storm of blades. Following closely behind him was the word pre. Chapter 1398. There weren't many naturally formed universe secret regions. Within the outer domain Milky Way, there were less than 40 secret realms in total. The factors that led to the formation of a universe mystic realm were extremely complex. The 10 great families of the divine realm had once invested a massive amount of resources into exploring these mystic realms in order to research the reasons behind their formation. Even now, they still hadn't fully understood what was going on. Currently, he only knew that the formation of the universe secret realm was related to the primal chaos. Strictly speaking, there wasn't much of a difference whether the research was done or not. However, in order to ensure their position as the top family in the divine domain, the 10 great families of the divine domain still had to conduct research. Moreover, since there was research, there would definitely be research funding. As for where the profits had gone, only the members of the 10 great clans themselves knew. Researching the essence of the universe's secret regions was to deepen one's understanding of the secret regions. From there, it would be easier to obtain precious resources from the secret regions. To put it bluntly, it was all for sponsored partnerships. Taking the Sword King realm as an example, if one could ignore the Blade Tempest and freely enter and exit the Sword King realm, bring in and out the spirit swords that were born naturally, and then resell them, one would make a fortune. Wang Ling did have the ability to do so. But father and mother Wang had taught him from a young age not to use his abilities to make money. So the truth was that if Wang Ling could use his ability, he could definitely become as rich as a country. Forget about the Sword King world, it would be enough if he could sell all the death substitute talismans he had drawn. Using her Galaxy Magic Mecha skin, Bai Qiao safely led everyone through the storm of blades. These blades, which contained high levels of spirit power, were in fact as fine as dust. Imagine, if every grain of sand on the beach was a blade, what kind of feeling would that be? If a cultivator was drawn into it without an extremely high realm, he would not be able to return. Even if he could withstand it for a while, the layer of blade tempest was simply too thick. One mistake and he might die. Even if you could travel there in the end, you would still have to consider the problem of returning. Although Bai Qiao's body was made of peach wood, it was harder than a sword made of metal. As she weaved through the air, the mecha armor's skin glowed with a metallic light, like dazzling stars. In the end, Bai Qiao led everyone to successfully land on a barren mountain near the coast. This was the famous Broken Sword Mountain in the Sword King realm. Rather than calling it a mountain, it was more like a huge broken sword that was hundreds of feet tall. Rumor has it that this was a huge sword with a very thick body. It was born in the Sword King realm thousands of years ago. He was as big as a mountain when he was born. Many sword spirits felt that Big Sword was a rare genius. Maybe he could challenge and break out of the blade storm. And then there was no then. The Great Sword's blade spirit had failed to break through. His body was split into two. Half of it fell into the Sea of Swords, while the other half turned into broken swords that were forever stuck on the shore, becoming the Broken Sword Mountain. Subsequently, it became a major scenic spot in the Sword King realm forever. Over the past 1,000 years, countless newly born sword spirits had visited this place and carved their own views on the story of the Great Sword spirit charging into the blade storm. If you don't court death, you won't die. So, what's the use of being big? Isn't it just a fat otaku sword? Thank goodness I'm not a great sword. I'd better stay in the Sword King realm obediently. Casually charging into the blade storm is courting death. Lotus Sun could see these words carved everywhere on the mountain wall of Broken Sword Mountain. Needless to say, these words had come from other sword spirits. These good-for-nothings always complain about heaven and earth. When Bai Qiao saw the words on the mountain wall, she rolled her eyes on the spot. She had also heard about this great sword. Back in the Sword King realm, when all the sword spirits were born, their first thought was to charge into the blade storm, even if they didn't succeed in the end and paid the price with their lives. This used to be seen as a kind of glory. But now, more and more sword spirits interpreted this as overestimating one's capabilities, and used this as a warning to future sword spirits not to challenge the blade storm unless they were confident enough. As a result, there were now more and more sword spirits in the Sword King realm. Furthermore, the new sword spirits were influenced by this new concept, and became more and more cowardly. Later, sword spirits like Jinka and Yu, who had once successfully escaped the Sword King realm, became legends in the stories of this new generation of sword spirits. This was once thought to be impossible. Has Senior Bai Qiao ever returned here? Lotus Sun asked curiously. She comes back when she wants to and goes out when she wants to. It's nothing special. Bai Qiao shrugged inside. It's a pity that the new generation of sword spirits aren't good enough, and they're getting worse with each generation. In comparison, her family's Jinko was much more outstanding. It had only taken him a week to successfully break through the Blade Storm and become the publicly acknowledged #1 sword spirit. But as the saying went, a hero doesn't boast about his past achievements. Bai Qiao felt that there was no need to show off her past achievements. Without further ado, Lotus Sun immediately released Mysterious Sea Sword Chi in an attempt to sense the location of the third Heavenly Dao Magic Cube. But this time, it didn't go as smoothly as it had on Divine Dao Star. There were too many Sword King Realm sword spirits, and the Sword Chi was all intertwined to form a natural barrier, making it impossible for Mysterious Sea Sword Chi to spread out smoothly. This is why Lord Ling asked me to bring you here. While your battle strength is strong, it's mainly focused on Mysterious Sea. Don't think of yourself as invincible. You should still ask for help when you need it. It's also wrong to be too arrogant and complacent, Bai Qiao reminded her. This was actually what the other people in Battle Sect thought as well, but considering that they wouldn't say it so easily out of fear of losing face, Bai Qiao volunteered to step forward and be the bad guy. Hearing this, Lotus Sun didn't say anything unnecessary, and just accepted the advice with a smile on her face. Senior Bai Qiao is right, I'll definitely keep it in mind. Bai Qiao nodded in satisfaction. Just wait, I also have a few friends in the Sword King realm. They'll lead us to the magic cube this time. Friends? Lotus Sun raised an eyebrow. Less than 3 minutes later, Lotus Sun sensed through her sword chi that 3 people were approaching them at the speed of light 100 meters ahead. 1 woman and 2 men. The female sword spirit in the lead was wearing a tight black leather battle suit that perfectly outlined her sexy and curvaceous figure. Very strong sword chi, Loopy Toad said after sensing it for a bit. Very quickly, the 3 sword spirits turned into streaks of light and appeared in front of them. They then knelt down on one knee and greeted Bai Qiao. Lady Bai Qiao, we are late to welcome you. Please forgive us. Forget it, all of you get up. Bai Qiao wanted to blame them, but felt that arguing would just delay her from finishing her mission earlier and going back to play the game. So she dropped the matter. This is Carter. Pointing at the female sword spirit in front of her, Bai Qiao introduced her to Lotus Sun and Loopy Toad. Carter's true form is a dagger, and his ultimate skill is Death Lotus. He can split himself into thousands of pieces and then form tornadoes. Lotus Sun. Then she turned her gaze to the remaining 2 male sword spirits. One of them had a face as white as snow and in modern terms looked like a sissy. He had the potential to be an idol star and was the kind of guy that girls really liked. The other one had a full beard and was dressed like a Spartan warrior. This one has very white skin, he's called Endless. His ultimate skill is a one-hit kill, and he's the sword spirit of choice for cultivators who like to use critical strike sword techniques. Bai Qiao introduced them one by one. This one with the full beard, you can call him Old Man. Among the sword spirits, he can achieve temporary invincibility for 5 seconds, and can even block Jinka's world-annihilating sword. After 5 seconds he'll be an Iron Fool and the cooldown time is very long. Lotus Sun, then classmate Wang Ling, Bai Qiao. Oh, Lord Ling is an exception. Even if he's invincible for 50 seconds it's no use, he'll still crush him. Hearing this, the 3 sword spirits sighed in their hearts. Actually, that wasn't their name at all, but Bai Qiao had forcibly changed their names. She said that their ultimate skill was very similar to a certain game's mechanism, and that it was easier to call them that way. Chapter 1399. After Bai Qiao gave the basic introduction, Lotus Sun had a general understanding of the 3 sword spirits in front of her. Greetings, seniors. Carter, Wu Jin and Old Barbarian shuddered at this form of address, and they really didn't dare accept it. Miss Sun, you can just call us by our names, there's no need to call us seniors. We were born from the universe and it's only by coincidence that we're older than you. In terms of combat strength we should call you seniors, Wu Jin said politely. Seniors know me? Lotus Sun was amazed. Because Bai Qiao hadn't introduced her. Miss Sun is too famous now. At least in the circle of sword spirits who follow Lord Jinka and Lord Bai Qiao, there's no one who doesn't know your name, Wu Jin answered truthfully. In fact, the reason why Lotus Sun's name was so resounding actually had something to do with Mysterious Sea. It was as Limitless had said. Sword spirits were born from the universe. It was the same for Mysterious Sea. All the swords in the world come from the Sword King world. This means that the Sword King world is the origin of all sword spirits. That's right. But strictly speaking, not all sword spirits come from the Sword King world. Wu Jin told Lotus Sun about the origin of sword spirits. He gave an example. For example, Mysterious Sea was in fact a native sword spirit born on Earth. Sword spirits who weren't born in the Sword King world were in fact the descendants of the spirit swords who had fled the Sword King world. As for the relationship between Wang Ling and Jinka, it was a mutual resonance between two experts. After Jinka escaped the Sword King world, he had been in a deep sleep for a very long time, and hadn't chosen his own master. Because no one was good enough for him. Until Wang Ling was born. Sword spirits can also reproduce, but they reproduce asexually. After two sword spirits meet each other's eyes, they can enter chaos, and the universe will then give birth to a new sword spirit. Wu Jin explained patiently, of course, Lord Jinka and Lord Baiqiao are clearly one sword, but the sword body and scabbard give birth to a spirit at the same time. There's no other sword like this in the entire Sword King world. Saying this, he couldn't help smiling bitterly. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this kind of sword, which was born with a wife, had an amazing bone structure. The newborn sword spirits produced by sword spirits would not appear in the Sword King realm when they were born. Instead, it would choose its own sword master within the universe based on its own characteristics. Therefore, many of the so-called sword spirits that were born on Earth did not come from the Sword King realm. However, his parents belonged to the Sword King realm. Since it wasn't a sword spirit born in the Sword King realm, the quality of the sword spirit would naturally be different. The quality of the sword spirit nurtured in the Sword King realm was beyond imagination. Therefore, there was news of many upper-class cultivators coming to the Sword King realm to look for swords, only to perish in the outer layer of the Blade Storm. If they're all sword spirits from the Sword King world, from a genetic point of view, the quality of the new sword spirits they give birth to shouldn't be too bad. Loopy Toad frowned, feeling that it had discovered something incredible. Sword spirits also need to be well matched in terms of social status. If it was a mix and match, the quality would naturally not be too high. For example, it's obviously a great sword, but it's a short dagger. Wu Jin said. I see. Loopy Toad nodded. It was for this reason that most of the local sword spirits in the Sword King realm actually looked down on non-purebred hybrids from other places. Miss Sun, do you now know why you and Miss Mysterious Sea are so famous? Wu Jin said with a wry smile. At that moment, realization dawned on her. Her Mysterious Sea wasn't a local sword spirit from the Sword King realm, but because it had fused with two Heavenly Dao magic cubes, its battle strength had soared. It was directly ranked 8th on the Sword King realm's ranking list. For a non-purebred sword spirit to be able to do this was undoubtedly a vicious blow to the sword spirits in the Sword King realm. Sun Yinger smiled. I really want to know who the 3 unlucky bastards who have been knocked off the list are. Bai Qiao looked at Sun Yinger expressionlessly. It's the 3 of them. Lotus Sun, Sun Yinger, Loopy Toad. Before Mysterious Sea had leveled up, Carter, Wu Jin and Old Barbarian had been ranked 8th, 9th and 10th respectively. Now that Mysterious Sea had come, Carter's position had been replaced, and Wu Jin had become 9th. Wu Jin had become 10th. And the most unlucky person was none other than Old Barbarian. He had been directly knocked off the top 10 list, and was now struggling in 11th place. After that, Carter led her and the others through the intricate magic arrays of the Sword King realm. About 10 minutes later they finally arrived at Sword Capital, which was in the heart of the Sword King realm. The 3rd magic cube was in Sword Capital. This was the largest capital city in the entire Sword King realm, and its tall metal walls gave off a simple and unadorned aura. According to Wu Jin's introduction, all the buildings in the Sword King realm had been forged from sword spirits who had failed to break into the Sword Blade Storm. After failing to break into the Sword Blade Storm, the sword spirits would forever return to their original form and lose their luster. This indicated that the sword spirit inside the sword had died, and the sword itself had become a material that could be reused. Why didn't you recycle the broken sword on the edge of the Sea of Swords? Sun Yinger asked curiously. Chapter 1400. Sword City had a strong cultural and historical atmosphere. Just like those ancient towns left behind on Earth, they still maintained the simple style of the old era. With the progress of modernization, the number of ancient buildings left by the people of the past was decreasing year by year. Those that needed to be demolished were demolished, and those that needed to be renovated were renovated. Tall buildings made of reinforced concrete were gradually replacing history. So the Songhai city they lived in was pretty special. In such a first-tier city, the architectural style was indeed a rare mix of ancient and modern styles. Hence, the young girl didn't feel uncomfortable at all when she arrived at the Sword City's ancient street. There were a lot of old streets like this in Songhai City, and she had always wanted to find a time to invite Wang Ling to take a look. Lotus Sun softly hummed the melody of a pop song. Although she didn't sing any words, Bai Qiao could guess the name of the song right away. Li Ronghao's Old Street. Walking on such a street, having such background music was indeed very fitting. Back then the Sword King realm was in chaos. There was no such civilization and order. Although the sword spirit was born from the universe, it was just a spirit, in the beginning. It was Tao ancestor Wang who had brought human civilization here and named it the Sword King realm. Then the spirit becomes the sword spirit, Wu Jin explained on the way to the Sword City Royal Palace. So the reason why the sword spirit is in human form now is largely because Tao ancestor Wang brought human civilization with him? Lotus Sun asked. That's right. However, not all sword spirits were humanoid. There are also a small number of alien sword spirits. They look like animals, plants, and even extraterrestrial life forms. Wu Jin said, however, these appearances are not fixed. As long as one's cultivation is high enough, the sword spirit can freely choose its own appearance. At this time, old barbarian said with a smile, for example, Carter. Her initial appearance was a garlic tortoise. Garlic tortoise? This is the seed of the wondrous frog. If it wasn't for her loyalty to Lady Bai Qiao, she might not have changed into a human form. After Barbarian finished speaking, Lotus Sun glanced at Carter. She saw that the woman in front of her was completely unperturbed by Wu Jin's dark history. She didn't take Barbarian's words to heart at all. This was one of the 3 unmarried women. In some sense he was a little similar to Wang Ling, and Lotus Sun felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. The inner world of people with facial paralysis might be similar. Therefore, communicating more with people with facial paralysis would help increase the experience of communicating with people with similar facial paralysis. As they passed by a sword school, Lotus Sun suddenly thought of a question. By the way, can I buy swords in the Sword King realm? Lotus Sun had actually been thinking about this as well. In order to deal with that groundhog, Anwan had put in a lot of effort, and the girl had always been grateful to her. This was a huge favor, and Lotus Sun had been thinking about how to repay it. Now that she had finally arrived at the Sword King realm, she wondered if she could help Anwan, who had yet to be born, choose a suitable spirit sword. Lotus Sun calculated the time. There was still half a month before December 30th. Her due date was approaching. If she could find a suitable spirit sword for Anwan, she would be willing to pay any price. Wu Jin said, what Miss Sun saw was the Sword King realm's hired sword pavilions. Generally speaking, they can openly hire sword spirits to protect them. The employers include cultivators as well as sword spirits from other Sword King realms. Sword spirit hiring sword spirit? Yes, this Sword King realm is very rich in mineral resources. If we can obtain rare ores, we can upgrade the sword body. This will increase the success rate of breaking through the blade storm. Speaking up to this point, Wu Jin frowned. As for buying a sword, human currency isn't worth much in the Sword King realm, so the best way is to use an equivalent exchange. As long as an agreement is reached, a sword spirit will be willing to sign a contract. After Wu Jin said this, Bai Qiao added, there are very few cultivators who have the strength to enter the Sword King realm, and a sword spirit contract is usually signed on the basis that both parties agree. Of course, if you really like it, you can't rule out the possibility of signing the contract without asking for money. To put it simply, Lord Ling's little sister hasn't been born yet, but I'm sure you've seen her strength. If she grows up and comes to the Sword King realm herself, there will definitely be sword spirits who will be willing to follow her without asking for money. Right now, she isn't that famous yet. If you want to find a spirit sword for her in advance, I'm afraid you'll have to pay a huge price. The price Bai Qiao was talking about was the price Lotus Sun would have to pay for not relying on Wang Ling's face. Otherwise, given her and Jinka's status in the Sword King realm, countless sword spirits would be willing to come for an interview and become Wang Nuan's spirit sword with just a shout. But that wouldn't be interesting. Bai Qiao could tell that the girl wanted to rely on her own strength to choose a spirit sword for Wang Nuan. Unfortunately, this wasn't Earth. In a situation where money didn't circulate, the condition for buying a sword didn't exist at all. Even if she used items to make up for it, the only valuable thing Lotus Sun could offer was probably this mysterious sea in her hand, it wasn't like she could sell Mysterious Sea to exchange for a sword for Wang Nuan. Thus, Lotus Sun sank into deep thought at Bai Qiao's words. I remember, the Sword Dao conference is in 2 days. If you win the competition, will you be rewarded with a piece of Sword God alloy? If you can use the alloy as a bargaining chip, I think most of the sword spirits in the Sword King realm will want to come for an interview. At that moment, Old Barbarian opened his mouth and pointed out a bright path for the helpless girl. But as soon as he said this, Wu Jin on the side was blank for a moment, and then he patted his head. All right. I remember, it seems like there's something like that. I'll also attend the Sword Dao conference. After that, Wu Jin hurriedly nudged Carter next to him with his elbow. After a moment of silence, Carter nodded and said, there is one, the Sword Dao conference. There's something like that, right? I think this is a good opportunity, Miss Sun. Old Barbarian quickly followed up on Carter's words and continued, if you can get this piece of Sword God alloy, you can choose a sword for Daoist Nuan. When the time comes, the sword spirits who will come for an interview will probably line up from Sword City to Sword Sea. I'll participate. Lotus Sun said seriously, but how do I sign up? We'll do it for you, Miss Sunday. Old Barbarian patted his chest and said. Thank you so much, seniors. Lotus Sun said with a wide smile. Hearing this, the corners of Bai Qiao's mouth finally couldn't help twitching. She felt that these 3 people were acting a little too much. What King Sword Dao conference? If there really was such a Sword Dao conference, how could she not know about it? In order to curry favor with this girl, they had directly held a Sword Dao conference in the air. But Bai Qiao wasn't in a hurry to expose them. She wanted to see how on earth these 3 people were going to wrap things up. Chapter 1401. The 3rd Heavenly Dao Magic Cube was sealed under Sword City's royal palace, and Nine Nether had sent a large number of soldiers to guard it. When Lotus Sun met Nine Nether for the first time, she felt that he was a very capable person who was very mature and experienced. Nine Nether had long dark gray hair that casually draped over his shoulders and reached his waist. He was dressed in a black tight-fitting outfit, with a red lightning embroidered waistband that perfectly accentuated his slender waist and long legs. His eyes were narrowed the whole time, and like his name, people couldn't help but feel a sense of mystery. Lotus Sun had heard from Bai Qiao that Nine Nether couldn't be considered one of them for the time being, so the consensus about the new Rubik's Cube was, Bai Qiao created this new Rubik's Cube, and Lotus Sun is Bai Qiao's disciple. On the way, Lotus Sun was very cautious in her conversation with Nine Nether to avoid spilling the beans. Lord Nine Nether. Greetings. Lord Bai Qiao. When they passed by the underground palace, the guards at the entrance saw Nine Nether and Bai Qiao behind him, and they fell to their knees on the spot. The sword spirits in charge of guarding the 3rd Heavenly Dao Magic Cube were carefully selected by Nine Nether. They were all ranked in the top 50 on the list of swords. Their leader was a girl called Little Qian. This was a toothpick sword. It was only the size of a toothpick, but contained enormous spirit power. It was currently ranked 6th. Lord Bai Qiao, this is the old Rubik's Cube. At that moment, Nine Nether's gaze was fixed on the glowing object at the end of the corridor in the underground palace, which was restrained by several thigh-like chains of light. These Heavenly Dao chains of light had been left behind when Dao Ancestor Wang had set up the Heavenly Dao Magic Cube back then, and were used to stabilize it. Lotus Sun took out the 3rd new Rubik's Cube that Wang Ling had casually pinched out. After sensing the aura of the old Rubik's Cube in front of it, the new Rubik's Cube floated over on its own. Then everyone heard a "pa" sound as if 2 runners in a long-distance race were completing a relay. The old Rubik's Cube was directly replaced by the new Rubik's Cube, and in the end, it fell into Lotus Sun's hands. Success. The replacement of the 3rd Rubik's Cube went even smoother than Lotus Sun had imagined. Because the Rubik's Cube itself didn't riot, there was no need to be sucked into the secret chamber of the Heavenly Dao Rubik's Cube like the last time on Divine Dao Star. At this point, the new Rubik's Cube was successfully replaced. However, Nine Nether also noticed the changes ahead. He was a little puzzled. Lady Bai Qiao, Dao Ancestor Wang's Heavenly Dao light chain seemed to have disappeared. Is he really alright? My new Rubik's Cube is very intelligent. It automatically completed the swap and was very obedient. He's many times more reliable than old Rubik's Fong. Bai Qiao snorted. Alright, now that we've done the swapping, Miss Sun and I will take our leave. Pay more attention to the Sword Dao meet. Yes. Nine Nether bowed to Bai Qiao. About 3 minutes ago he received a message about the Sword Dao meet. Moreover, this conference had to be held within 2 days. This was undoubtedly a huge problem for Nine Nether. In order to hold an unprecedentedly grand convention, other than the Sword God alloy, finding contestants, finding judges, and finding a title sponsor were all important. Nine Nether didn't know if she could make it in time, but she could only try her best to complete it. Is it all because of Miss Sun? Nine Nether looked at Lotus Sun, feeling a little sour in her heart. A human girl at the Foundation establishment stage could actually worship Lady Bai Qiao as her Shifu. She was so lucky. When Lotus Sun got home she looked at the time. Since the swap had gone very smoothly, it had only taken her less than 3 hours to get back. There was still an hour before midnight of the next day. As far as Lotus Sun was concerned, there were only 2 important matters in front of her. The first thing he wanted to do was to meet that girl named Jianghu. The second was the Sword Dao meet in the Sword King world. Mysterious Sea had already successfully reached 3 cores, but its ranking on the list of swords still hadn't changed. The top few spirit swords were truly frighteningly strong. But with 3 cores, Lotus Sun felt that she still had a chance of winning that Sword God alloy as long as there weren't too strong of an opponent. But that was all for another day. The results would only be known at the Sword Dao meet in 2 days. So now the most important thing in front of the girl was, "What are you going to do?" asked Loopy Toad. It had come back with Lotus Sun, and hadn't chosen to go directly to the Wang family's small villa. Because the show in front of it was too exciting, Loopy Toad was a little reluctant to leave, and just wanted to stay and observe how things would develop. I still have to find out what the other party's background is first. The girl stared at the love letter in her hand, lost in thought. Although her real name, address and phone number were written on it, acting rashly wasn't a wise choice. Lotus Sun turned on her computer, logged into the group's platform, and tried to activate the Wukong system. Seeing Lotus Sun's serious expression, Sun Yinger was very enthusiastic. "Rong, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to see if this girl has used her phone number to leave any purchase records," Lotus Sun replied. "Why do I get the feeling that you're looking for evidence of an affair?" As a qualified mind-stomping expert, Lotus Sun almost choked on her saliva at Sun Yinger's words. You're spouting nonsense again?" Lotus Sun's face was a little hot, but she still pretended to be calm as she stared at the computer and searched for relevant information. In the end she found some clues. So there really is. Lotus Sun looked at the customer spending records on the platform in amazement. "Cake, donuts, milk tea, brown sugar?" Hearing this, Loopy Toad was surprised. "Doesn't your family sell elixirs?" "Grandpa has a lot of side businesses. They're all insignificant," Lotus Sun replied, unperturbed. "Grandpa basically dabbles in any industry you can think of. Our family also invests in dog food." "Loopy Toad, this girl really likes sweets?" "Generally speaking, girls who like sweets shouldn't be too hard to deal with." Lotus Sun rubbed her chin as she analyzed. Combining the address provided in the love letter, she realized that the address Jiang Inying had bought things from wasn't the same as the one written in the love letter. 232 Northwest Road, Lotus Sun said. "This is the address I found on the computer, and her latest purchase record is from the day before yesterday. It's also not the same address as the one in the love letter." "Northwest Road?" Loopy Toad chewed on this address carefully, feeling that it sounded a little familiar. Soon, it hurriedly stood up and moved its head closer. "So it's here. You know this place?" Lotus Sun asked. "This is the staff apartment where Wei Ji lives," Loopy Toad said, "and Marshal Jiang also lives there. So could this girl be Marshal Jiang's granddaughter or something like that? The granddaughter of one of the 10 generals?" Lotus Sun smiled slightly. If that really was the case, then she would be an interesting opponent. Chapter 1402. Whether she was Marshal Jiang's granddaughter or not, judging from the current situation, it was hard to say. There were many people with the same surname in this world, so the possibility of accidents couldn't be ruled out. But Loopy Toad had already felt that the name Jiang Inying sounded very familiar. Now, combined with the exact address on Northwest Road, it was almost certain in its heart. Even if Jiang Inying wasn't Marshal Jiang's biological granddaughter, they were definitely related. For a while, Loopy Toad had stayed at Wei Ji's house and played games with him. Marshal Jiang often came upstairs to visit, and the old Marshal and Wei Ji had always been on good terms. It was during these visits that Loopy Toad seemed to have heard the two of them mention this name. In short, it did not matter if it had anything to do with the old Marshal or not. Lotus Sun felt that she still needed to know why Jiang Yingying had a good impression of Wang Ling. All feelings couldn't be born for no reason. She read the love letter in her hand several times, but Jiang Yingying didn't directly explain how she had met Wang Ling. This was clearly a girl from another school. Could it be that she was a fangirl who had been attracted by classmate Wang Ling at the exchange meet between number 60 high and other schools? For a moment, many answers appeared in Lotus Sun's mind. Why don't you directly add me on WeChat and ask? Loopy Toad chuckled. Like everyone else, it was the type to watch a good show and didn't mind blowing things up. Girls don't usually add strangers on WeChat. So we have to get to know her first, then think of a way to get close to her, Lotus Sun replied. The young lady looked at the phone number on the love letter. After confirming that she could directly add Jiang Yingying's WeChat account through the phone number, she decided to temporarily suppress her urge to add Jiang Yingying as a friend. At times like this, she needed to remain calm. As the saying goes, mistakes are made in a hurry. Now that he only had one opponent, he couldn't afford to panic. Anyway, as long as it was within the campus circle, it would be easy to handle. When she went to school tomorrow, she decided to make use of her connections in the student union. That way he would be able to obtain more information about Jiang Yingying. Let's call it a day. I'll send Big Sis Qingyi a text and go to bed. Lotus Sun stretched. What message did you send to Lu Qingyi? Loopy Toad was blank. Lotus Sun first turned her gaze to the rest of the love letters, and then gave an incredibly kind smile. Of course it's to report about brother Wang Zhen. Loopy Toad, in the last 2 days Wang Zhen and Lu Qingyi had been taking care of renting a house outside. They chose the type of house, renovated it and bought furniture. This was all work. At this time they were staying in a high-end couples hotel. The hotel had all kinds of facilities. The luxurious suites were equipped with racks for drinks and fruits of different seasons, a beauty machine, a full set of intelligent healthcare massage equipment, and even a built-in swimming pool. The young couple had just confirmed their relationship, so they were stuck together like glue. Wang Zhen also worked very hard and was practically at the front doing all the dirty and tiring work. Lu Qingyi was lying on a chair in a swimsuit and applying a facial mask. His relaxed mood was broken by a sudden text message. This message came from Wang Ling. The content of the message was simple. It was a photo of a pile of love letters on the ground. There was also a very short sentence, Wang Zhen who flirts everywhere. The camera function of the King's Eye captured a clear picture. Moreover, it came with the ability to analyze everything in 360 degrees without any blind spots. In other words, as long as Lu Qingyi clicked on any of the letters in this photo, she would be able to see the contents of the letters. The King's Eye's analytical ability was so strong that it could completely analyze a photo even from a blind spot. Even the parts of the letters that had been erased were restored. For example, the word Jin in classmate Wang Zhen had been erased by Wang Zhen before, but now it was restored with the King's Eye. Lu Qingyi clicked on a few of the letters and her whole person felt terrible. The facial mask on her face fell to the ground with a plop. Do you want to have a bedtime meeting? Wang Zhen walked over and crouched down to wrap his arms around Lu Qingyi's neck from behind. But when he did, he suddenly felt that the atmosphere wasn't right. That wasn't right. What on earth was going on? It didn't seem like he had done anything wrong today. Ding. At that moment, Lu Qingyi received a second text message. This one was from Lotus Sun. It perfectly confirmed the content of Wang Ling's previous text message. Aren't you going to explain these love letters to me? Lu Qingyi took a deep breath. Her body was already trembling violently, but she still tried to keep calm. Wang Zhen felt like there was a danger hanging over his head at that moment. He tried to quibble. These love letters are all written by classmate Wang. They might be written for Ling Jinren. You want to frame Ling Jinren with this little trick? Lu Qingyi laughed. She clicked on the photos that had been analyzed by the King's Eye in all aspects. Wang Zhen was immediately dumbfounded. At the same time he roared in his heart. F***K. Was there a need for that? It was just some love letters. Even the ability of the King's Eye had been used, Wang Zhen cried. The point was that he wasn't the real instigator. It was clearly that guy Fang Xing who had come up with this idea. Why was he the only one to take the blame? First of all, it's impossible for Ling Jinren to lie. Secondly, my disciple's text confirms what Ling Jinren said. What the hell are you doing? Lu Qingyi looked at Wang Zhen and snorted. You want to destroy the love letters, so in for a penny, in for a pound, you're going all out to frame Ling Jinren? You've got guts, Wang Zhen. These love letters were actually written by other people before we established our relationship. I'm too popular, you can't blame me? Wang Jin said in a low voice, feeling very aggrieved. At the same time, he felt that he couldn't explain himself, and might not be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. I can't explain it clearly, but I admit it. You can punish me however you want. Wang Jin sighed. Saying this, he walked over to the fruit rack of his own accord and picked up a durian. You're hurting yourself to gain sympathy? Don't think I'll feel sorry for you. Kneel down if you can. Lu Qingyi raised her hand and used the metal hardening spell to directly turn the durian in Wang Zhen's hand into an iron durian, which was several times harder. However, Wang Zhen's expression didn't change in the slightest in the face of this change. He directly knelt down in front of the durian. With a crack, the entire iron durian was instantly smashed to pieces. But Wang Zhen's knees weren't affected at all. Why are you so skilled? Lu Qingyi was stunned. When I was little, I was often beaten by my parents. I've also knelt on durians made of diamonds. As soon as Wang Zhen said this, at that moment, Lord Ma's golden light of teleportation landed precisely on the edge of the pool. A heavenly Dao durian that Wang Ling had personally enchanted appeared in front of Lu Qingyi and Wang Zhen. P.S. There's actually an Easter egg in this chapter. Combine this with the fact that Lord Ma's golden light of teleportation can only teleport you to places you've already been to, and you'll realize something terrifying when you think about it. Chapter 1403. After giving away the heavenly Dao durian, Wang Ling felt a lot more at ease. Whether Wang Zhen's knees were broken or not, it had nothing to do with him. This was what it meant by an eye for an eye. You had to pay for what you did sooner or later. On the other hand, Lotus Sun wanted to help Anwan look for a spirit sword. Through his superb and familiar screen peeping skills, Wang Ling already had some understanding. In fact, it could be said that he and Lotus Sun had the same idea. It had always been the Wang family's tradition to give a sword to a child at birth. Even if Lotus Sun hadn't prepared one, Wang Ling would have thought of a way to get a spirit sword for his little sister. Wang Ling didn't have high requirements for a spirit sword. For one thing, it had to be obedient to his little sister's wishes. For another, it had to be flexible. This was an additional condition based on the first point. The main point was that he hoped it wouldn't be blindly loyal. If Anwan did something wrong, it had to be stopped in time. So, to sum up, Wang Ling's requirements were actually very simple. As long as this sword could accompany his little sister as she grew up, help her with her homework when she ran into trouble with her studies, give her a massage when she was tired to relieve stress, protect her at the first instant when she was bullied, take her place when she needed someone to play games with her. Wang Ling listed all of these conditions neatly in the notebook. In his opinion, a spirit sword worthy of his little sister was the bare minimum. Sword master, apart from being strong in battle, I don't seem to have anything else. Staring at the conditions listed from beginning to end in the notebook, Jinka suddenly felt that he was a little useless. Wang Ling rubbed Jinka's white hair again to comfort him. For Wang Ling, Jinka's companionship from a young age was destined to be a part of his memories that he couldn't bear to part with. And his attitude toward Jinka was like that of an old father? It was fine as long as Jinka could stay with him in his old age. As for his studies, games and battle strength, he was already strong enough, so Jinka just needed to act cute on one side. Jinka sighed. Although he said he was looking for a spirit sword, it felt more like he was looking for a confinement nanny. It was really too difficult to be a spirit sword nowadays. Not only did you have to be strong in battle, you also had to develop morally, intellectually, physically, and aesthetically. Most importantly, he had to learn how to do functions. And in a sense, functions were also a compulsory lesson for modern spirit swords. For example, when a spirit sword was attacking from a distance, one had to calculate the parabola accurately. Lotus Sun wanted to find a spirit sword for Wang Nuan, but in reality she was also doing some work for him. Moreover, a girl's thoughts might be more meticulous than his. Wang Ling felt that he might as well go with the flow and directly use this impromptu Sword Dao conference to look for spirit swords. Sword God Alloy, this thing is actually not worth much to you, right? At that moment, Loopy Toad's voice rang out behind him. Lord Ma had already sent it back. Running back and forth between the two villas wasn't easy for Loopy Toad. The competition over there was held at the last minute. Bai Qiao said that Sword King Realm has 0 Sword God Alloy in stock. I'm afraid it's too late to mine and refine it again. So I wanted to ask if you have any ideas, Loopy Toad said. It was now just an errand boy. Sword God Alloy actually existed in Wang Ling's treasure house. This was one of the rarest metals in the universe, and there was a very limited amount of it in the entire Sword King realm. Because it was extremely difficult to refine, it was very rare. And because it was rare, it was precious. A piece of alloy the size of a die was enough to upgrade a spirit sword once. An Wang Ling's King's Treasure Pants had a piece of this rare sword god alloy the size of a small mountain. Furthermore, it was 100% pure without the slightest impurity. Using the Great Cutting spell, Wang Ling casually cut off a piece the size of a basketball and gave it to Loopy Toad. Loopy Toad was stunned. This piece of alloy the size of a die was already enough to upgrade a spirit sword. Directly giving it the size of a basketball, it would be enough for those spirit swords to smash themselves to pieces and remake them. Thus, when Bai Qiao and Loopy Toad went back to see Nine Nether with the basketball-sized piece of sword god alloy, Nine Nether was completely stupefied. Such a big lump? What happened to the rarest metal in the universe? Why was there such a big lump here? Furthermore, it was an extremely pure one. Nine Nether stretched out his hand to sense the purity of this piece of sword god alloy, and it was as if he had been struck by lightning again. 100% purity? Where did Lady Bai Qiao get this thing? His voice was trembling. Even as the current administrator of the Sword King world, Nine Nether still couldn't hide his excitement. Can I participate in this Sword Dao conference? Nine Nether's heart itched. With such a big piece of sword god alloy as a reward, the entire Sword King world might really go into an uproar, and countless spirit swords would fight to the death for this piece of sword god alloy. This is an exclusive collection, of course you don't know about it. Besides, I have no use for this kind of alloy at all. Bai Qiao shrugged. She and Jianghu were both made of peach wood, and it would instead be a burden for them to reintegrate metal elements into their bodies. At the same time, Nine Nether also discovered a very mystical item. He realized that the spirit swords at the top didn't seem to be made of metal. Jianghu and Bai Qiao were made of peach wood. Bamboo was the first. And the third-ranked spirit sword was an amber sword. None of the top 3 swords were made of metal, which instantly made Nine Nether feel like he had reincarnated into the wrong body. Just focus on this competition and you'll get an extra reward after it's done. I still have some sword god alloy. Bai Qiao swept Nine Nether a glance and said, as for Carter, Wu Jin and Old Barbarian, they should be busy preparing for the competition, so you'll have to inform them on my behalf. Work hard and you'll get plenty of rewards. This was actually Wang Ling's intention. Otherwise, Bai Qiao wouldn't have dared make this decision on her own. You had to give someone something in return for working overtime. There was a saying, as long as you paid enough overtime, it didn't matter if you had to work like an ox or a horse. With this kind of reward, Wang Ling believed that the Sword Dao conference this time would definitely go very smoothly. Don't worry, Lady Bai Qiao. We'll definitely do our best. Nine Nether bowed deeply to Bai Qiao. He himself was full of confidence in the preparations for the competition this time. The only thing to blame was the charm of the sword god alloy. Humans sucked in cats and sword spirits sucked in iron. Any sword spirit wouldn't be able to resist sucking in the sword god alloy. Smells so good. Nine Nether held this basketball-sized piece of sword god alloy with an intoxicated expression. Is it that bad? Loopy Toad didn't understand. Give me an example. Bai Qiao said telepathically to Loopy Toad, Lord also has the same expression when he smells the pepper smell of crispy noodle snacks. Loopy Toad, I get it. Chapter 1404. With Bai Qiao's promise of a reward, Nine Nether was naturally full of enthusiasm. Although this Sword Dao conference had been an impromptu idea, it absolutely couldn't be done on a whim. It had to be grand enough to give the human girl a real experience. Secondly, the participating sword spirits couldn't be too strong. At the very least, spirit swords ranked higher than Mysterious Sea couldn't participate. These spirit swords would be directly assigned to the judges. In a quiet room in Sword King World's palace, Nine Nether started a meeting with Carter, Wu Jin and Old Man. Although time is tight, I think it's still necessary to make a selection so that the overall quality of the contestants this time is a little higher. Nine Nether bent over the table. Throughout the entire process, his hands never stopped moving as he continued to take notes on his notebook. This competition is actually a good opportunity. Because the ranking data of the sword ranking is automatically generated by the sword ranking, the ranking also changes in real time according to the condition of the spirit sword. Therefore, there have always been many sword spirits who have doubts about the ranking of the sword ranking. Lord Nine Nether, what you mean is that we can take advantage of this opportunity to predetermine Miss Sun's victory, and also let the sword spirits verify the authenticity of the sword list? Old Man said as he stroked his beard. Old man, you're right, but you have to remember, you can't be so frank outside. Nine Nether smiled bitterly. This Sword Dao conference was indeed specially held for Lotus Sun, and if everything went as expected, she would be the predetermined champion. After all, this girl was Lady Bai Qiao's disciple. But this was something that could only be understood and not expressed in words. It was better to keep it strictly confidential. This was the routine of a so-called variety show. It wasn't unusual for a predetermined champion to be predetermined. If you wanted to make an artist popular with the power of capital, apart from giving them enough topics to talk about, you had to give them a champion package at the very least. At present, the sword list only calculates the top 100,000 sword spirits. I don't think there's a need for the nameless sword spirits after that to participate, Nine Nether said. But there are still too many sword spirits on the list. The ideal situation for our competition this time is 1,000 sword spirits. So, we still have to go through the audition. Lord Nine Nether, what do you think? To ensure that the sword spirits at every stage can participate, my current idea is to divide them into 5 little ancestors: bronze, silver, gold, diamond and king. Then each group will decide 200 winners, Nine Nether said. The others immediately understood Nine Nether's meaning. Among the sword spirits on the list of 100,000, there were only a few of them. According to this classification, among the 100,000 sword spirits, Sword Spirit number 1 and Sword Spirit number 19999 were the champions. Diamond groups 20,000 to 39,999. So on and so forth, the 100,000 sword spirits would be divided into groups, and then each group would go through a certain selection method to select 200 victors. In this way, it could guarantee that there would be sword spirits selected from each level, and they would all be sword spirits with higher overall qualities. Of course, this was how the teams were divided. It was the sword spirit's choice to participate in the competition or not. If they didn't sign up, it would be regarded as an automatic forfeit. Therefore, when it came to the audition stage, each group might not have a full 20,000 people. For example, the champion division would lose many strong competitors. After all, those who were ranked ahead of Mysterious Sea had all gone to be judges, so now it was just a hypothetical situation. If every group was full, how would they divide them into groups and auditions? What about Miss Sun during the audition? Miss Sun doesn't need to participate in the audition. There are so many people anyway and they won't be able to see her. When the time comes, I'll just advance directly. Finally, each group will decide on 200 people? That's not a bad idea. But I still feel that it's not fair. Even the last in the champion division can beat bronze, right? Wu Jin asked. My idea is, why don't we just decide on a few more champions? After the 200 sword spirits in each group are divided, the 200 sword spirits will fight until the champion is decided. And the champion of each group will get a reward. Nine Nether was very thoughtful. This way we can avoid some gossip. But the prize for the champion of each group is not Sword God Alloy, but a chance to use the Imperial Sword of Protection. Imperial Sword. Imperial Sword of Protection. Wu Jin and Old Barbarian's mouths twitched. It's a full-body recuperation for the sword body. Little Chen and I will apply the lubricant. That's sick. Even Carter couldn't stand it anymore. Sai, you guys are underestimating the allure of the Imperial Sword of Protection project. I don't know how many sword spirits would be fighting over this project. Nine Nether sighed. He gestured with his hand as he applied the lubricant, looking very professional. According to Nine Nether's current train of thought, once the champions of each group were decided, each would get a chance to use the Imperial Sword of Protection. This was the basic reward. As for the true grand prize, which was the Sword God Alloy, it would be born after the battle royale of the 5 groups. If nothing unexpected happened, Lotus Sun and Mysterious Sea would definitely win it. But now there was a problem in front of everyone. What kind of selection method should they use to reduce the number of people in each group from 20,000 to 200? First of all, a battle royale wasn't practical. When there were too many sword spirits, it would be hard to control the situation. When the time came, all 20,000 sword spirits would turn into beams of sword light and fly around in the sky, just like fireworks. Just looking at it would make one dizzy. Should we set up a special voting area for the sword ranking and let the sword spirits perform? Let all the sword spirits hold a public vote, and the sword ranking sword spirits can cast 2 votes. Wu Jin suggested. Nine Nether immediately rejected this proposal. We're not idle sword trainee. What's the point of a sword spirit performing? And an open voting system isn't good for Miss Sunday, that's true? Wuxia nodded. Carter had wanted to raise her hand to make a proposal. She had an idea for Creation 202, but after seeing Wuxia's rejection, she silently put down her hand. It seems that everyone is frowning. So now there's only one way left. Nine Nether stopped taking notes and rested his chin on his fingers. In fact, this method was very old, but it was very suitable in this situation. That method you mentioned, don't tell me? Seeing Nine Nether's old-fashioned movements, Wuxia already had an idea. It seems that there's really only one way. It's the least chaotic and also the fairest method. Old Barbarian had also thought of it. So what method is it? Carter still didn't understand. Carter, your reaction is too slow. Nine Nether smiled profoundly, and then instructed Little Chin outside the door, go make a public announcement and tell all the sword spirits who are interested in participating to gather in Sword God Square. Sword God Square? It was only now that Carter finally understood. It turned out that this ancient method was to use the ancient sword steel in Sword God Square to test the power of the sword chi. Looks like you've finally thought of it, Carter. Old Barbarian snorted. The older generation of sword spirits have all done the sword steel test. Back then, when I slashed with my sword power was at level 9. Chapter 1405. Because of the Sword Dao meet, the sword spirits of the entire Sword King realm were mobilized. This was a grand event that was rarely seen in 100 years, and the most important thing was that the reward was such a large pile of Sword God alloy. All the sword spirits couldn't help but rub their palms together. As the saying goes, the most important thing is to participate, and it would definitely not be a loss to participate. Moreover, Nine Nether's reward system was actually quite good in this regard. The final prize was the Sword God alloy. The first place of each group would have a chance to obtain the Royal Palace's Great Protection Sword, and all the participants in the qualifiers would receive an additional piece of low-purity Sword God alloy. This was a very small piece that Nine Nether had cut from the Great Sword God alloy. After being cut by 1,000 people, each piece was only the size of a BB bullet, and the purity was concentrated to 5%. A concentration of 5% meant that the success rate of fusion would be around 5%. Therefore, the low-purity Sword God alloy was nicknamed the Lucky Stone by many sword spirits. To the Lucky Stone, even if the success rate was only 5%, it was no different from 100%. Therefore, even such a small piece of low-purity alloy was enough to make the sword spirits fight over it. That night, there was a long queue in front of the Sword God Plaza. Countless sword spirits rushed over as soon as they received the notice. Carter and Xiao Qian were in charge of on-site supervision and statistical work. Old Barbarian and Limitless were in charge of maintaining order. In addition to controlling the field, the two men would also participate in the group stage. It wasn't to compete with Lotus Sun for a spot, but to ensure that she would advance. They would eliminate as many people as possible in the free-for-all phase of the 200-person competition. Then, if they lost to Lotus Sun in the end, the girl would be guaranteed first place in the group. That's right, this competition was so social and dark, funny. In any case, they were ranked below Mysterious C, so it was not unreasonable for them to be eliminated. As for the Nine Nether, he went to look for the remaining judges. Given that Bai Qiao, Jinka and you weren't participating in the judging panel, there were currently the following confirmed judges. Ranked 5th, himself, Nine Nether. Number 6, Xiao Qian, Toothpick Sword. However, it was not enough for the two of them to be the judges. Hence, Nine Nether's current job was to pull Yu Ling, who was ranked 3rd, and Mou, who was ranked 4th. Nine Nether knew the whereabouts of these two girls. Originally, Nine Nether had intended to look for Wind, who was ranked 7th. But it was a pity that Sui Feng was just like his name, drifting with the wind. Never knowing where he was. Drifting Wind was a feather sword. Its entire body was covered with feathers and it looked very light. As it swung, it could emit scorching phoenix flames. However, the phoenix fire had healing abilities, so it also had a powerful healing effect. Even damaged organs could be repaired by the phoenix fire. To be able to give the target being healed a feeling of pain and happiness. In the Sword King realm, in the Sword God Forest, in front of a 10,000-meter waterfall. A young girl with her hair tied up in a bun was sitting quietly under the waterfall. She was wearing a pink cheongsam with a very high slit on the side. She was sitting cross-legged with a pair of slender, white legs. There was a layer of light pink invisible sword barriers surrounding the girl. The waterfall above her head fell on the sword barrier, but it was cut by the sword chi. The water bounced and splashed in all directions. This was the bone-burying waterfall in the sword god forest. It was a good place for cultivation, but normal sword spirits didn't dare to approach it. Like the name of the waterfall, if the sword chi wasn't strong enough, it would probably be crushed by the huge water pressure of the waterfall. Yuling, I knew you would be here. Nine Nether stood in front of the waterfall, and her voice was transmitted into the girl's eyes through the roar of the waterfall. Yuling opened her eyes, revealing her gem-like pink eyes. The Sword Dao conference was your idea? Seems like you're very well informed. Nine Nether smiled with her hands behind her back. MOU was originally with me, but she went immediately after hearing it. She's more enthusiastic than I thought. She's obviously a jade sword, but she's not gentle at all. She's so impatient. Yuling lowered her eyelids. But being a judge doesn't suit me. You found the wrong person. Isn't there still wind? I don't know where he is. Nine Nether shook his head. Actually, if she really wanted to find him, she could always find him. But time was pressing and there wasn't much time left before the Sword Dao conference. It was already too late to find Wind now. It seems that he's still trying to locate his sword master. Yuling looked up at the starry sky in the distance. Finding a suitable sword master was in fact every sword spirit's long-cherished wish. In fact, the top 50 sword spirits on the sword list all had the ability to travel through the blade storm on their own. They could have gone out a long time ago, but because they couldn't find a suitable master, they had been cooped up in the Sword King world, waiting for the right time. It was like a strategist living in seclusion deep in the mountains. I'm afraid it won't be easy for Wind to find his sword master. Nine Nether smiled bitterly. His phoenix fire has a healing effect, and the person being burned is in pain and happiness. Even if he can find a sword master in the end, he'll be a masochist, said Yuling. Maybe. Nine Nether smiled and continued with the previous topic. Are you sure you won't be a judge? Chapter 1406. Thank you, Ling Ming replied politely. He had a smile on his face but he looked nervous. Don't be nervous. Do well. Just wait behind that yellow-haired brother, Little Chen said softly as she took notes, and then gave Ling Ming his number plate. Carter and Little Chen were very patient. After all, this was a newborn sword spirit and as seniors they had to take care of him. Most importantly, the child in front of them was a very likable and cute little guy. Although they weren't optimistic about Ling Ming's final test results, Ling Ming had entered the sword list not long after he was born, so he would definitely be someone worth looking forward to in the future. Transformed from a blade of grass? Interesting. Carter and Little Chen waited expectantly for Ling Ming to show up. At the same time, Carter's imagination ran wild. Transformed from a blade of grass. What kind of blade of grass could awaken in this way? Had Ling Jinren peed on it when it wasn't paying attention back then? At that moment, a lot of sword spirits were talking about Ling Ming's appearance in Sword God Square. They had thought that he was the child of some great sword spirit, but in the end he had actually been born independently in the Sword King world, and had actually come to register. He's at the bottom of the sword list at birth. How lucky. I wonder how much combat strength he can produce. Dao Ancestor Wang personally set up the sword steel back then, and can test a person's combat strength, talent and potential in all aspects, so combat strength is only one part of the overall score. The sword list's ranking is also based on combat strength. Comparatively speaking, the sword steel's overall evaluation is more objective. A sword spirit said as he looked at the huge sword steel in front of him. This sword steel was more than 3,000 zhang tall, but it was broken in its entirety. In the history of the sword list, this kind of fracture had only happened once. That was when Jinka had just been born. As soon as Jinka was born, he cut off half of the sword steel with one sword strike, and a large chunk of the originally 20,000 zhang sword steel was cut off and turned to dust on the spot by sword chi. Back then, Jinka had been invincible, number one in terms of combat strength, talent, and potential. It had alarmed the entire Sword King world. But such a miracle probably wouldn't happen a second time. The sword list was ranked according to combat strength, and it was already a given that Ling Ming's combat strength wouldn't be too high. The miracle of the sword steel breaking would never happen a second time. Therefore, the crux of the matter now was his talent and potential value. At this moment, all eyes were on the square. The sword steel stood tall in front of him, and all sorts of sword spirits surrounded it. Some were queuing up, while others came over to watch the fun after hearing the news. Most of the sword spirits were humanoid in shape, and there were also beast-shaped sword spirits. After Leng Ming received his number, he confirmed that he was behind a yellow-haired youth. The youth glanced at Leng Ming in disdain. "Little sword spirit, watch Big Brother perform for you." As he spoke, he walked towards the sword steel while his entire body emanated lightning, and a powerful strand of sword energy emanated from his body. "I remember him," he shouted. Lightning crackled. 100,000 volts of electricity. "It's him. I remember him." Many sword spirits began to whisper to each other. The moment they saw the burst of lightning, they realized that the yellow-haired man was Raiden, and the young man's lightning was his true form. Currently, Den Ming was ranked 286th on the combat power leaderboard. He was one of the experts in the challenger group. He had the habit of reading books. In the Sword King realm, there were also many young sword spirits who relied on selling their words to earn money and buy materials to upgrade their swords. In order to rush for updates, Dianming often went forward to shock those unscrupulous authors who delayed or stopped updating. Therefore, he had such a fearsome reputation. Dianming was very confident in his test results. He released his sword energy and slashed forward. Boom! In an instant, golden lightning shot in all directions, and the sound of thunder rumbled. The surging sword energy rushed forward and transformed into a lightning tiger that pounced on the sword steel. Then, the lightning tiger formed by the lightning sword energy merged into the sword steel and quickly disappeared. Dianming was very confident in his attack. He had used all his strength and he believed that the result would not be too bad. At the very least, it would not be a problem for him to enter the top 200 out of the 20,000 people in the challenger group. As long as his overall score was slightly higher, he would be able to enter the top 100. "How was it, little brother? How was Big Brother's move just now?" After the test, Dianming glanced at Leng Ming and smiled proudly. Soon, a string of ancient characters appeared on the sword steel. Carter glanced at it and reported the result while registering it. Dianming, level 216 sword energy, total value, 21600, pass. Current challenger group ranking, 162nd. This result could be said to be no surprise. With Dianming's level, the probability of him being selected was extremely high. After all, the evaluation of the sword steel was not purely based on combat strength. However, Dianming was still somewhat dissatisfied with the current ranking. He thought that he could at least enter the top 120. But now, it seemed that the sword steel's ranking was slightly lower because there were many other sword spirits in the challenger group who had not participated in the test. If he continued to encounter experts in the future, he would definitely be done for. Even so, in Dianming's opinion, at least he was not considered bad in the eyes of others. Especially in front of this little sword spirit. "Little brother, it's your turn." Dianming glanced at the dumbfounded Leng Ming and then retreated to the side. Leng Ming stepped forward and faced the sword steel. His face was flushed and he finally hammered it with his small fists. The sword steel did not respond. Everyone burst into laughter. "Little brother, your normal attacks are useless. You have to be like the Big Brother from before and use your own sword energy to slash at the sword steel," a kind-hearted person reminded him. Carter held her forehead and patiently stepped forward. She pressed on the area below Leng Ming's navel. "You have to use your chi from here, understand? When the sword energy comes up, release it from your fingers with all your might." "Okay." Leng Ming's face was flushed. He was anxious and shy. He did not expect to make a fool of himself as soon as he appeared. He composed himself and then followed Carter's instructions. Finally, a glowing green sword energy that looked like a small flame was nurtured in his palm. This sword energy? Does it really have combat strength? Many people stared at the scene in front of them and did not know whether to laugh or cry. Perhaps such a weak sword energy could only be used to light a cigarette? Indeed, in terms of combat strength, Leng Ming was still lacking. At this moment, the boy carefully protected the small wisp of sword energy that he had nurtured. That trace of glowing green sword energy had just touched the sword steel when it instantly sank into it. The sword steel was still unmoved. Many people had been looking forward to Leng Ming's performance, but it seemed that he had disappointed them. As expected, it still doesn't work? Hey, what can a newborn little sword spirit do? Sure enough, he's just lucky to be able to make it to the end of the sword list. However, just a few seconds after these people finished speaking, the entire sword steel actually started to shake violently. In that instant, a dazzling golden light burst out of the sword steel and resonated with the entire Sword King world. The sword energy that had been like a spark instantly turned into sword pressure that set a prairie ablaze, drowning out the whole of Sword God Square. This unusual phenomenon shocked everyone present. What the hell is going on? Almost all the sword spirits in the Sword King world, whether they were in Sword God Square or not, looked up at the sky and sensed the power coming from the sword steel. When the sword spirits in Sword God Square clearly saw the number displayed on the sword steel, they were all shocked. My God. 100,000. First in the bronze group. It's not just the bronze group. This number is unparalleled even in the king group. Not bad, not bad. At that moment in the Wang family's small villa on Earth, Jinka sensed the strong fluctuations coming from Sword God Square. He was a good seedling. Wang Ling nodded. He had also sensed it. A lot of sword spirits had now gathered in Sword God Square, which had piqued his curiosity a long time ago. Thus, he had familiarized himself with the God view, to spy on them. By the way, how much did you hit back then? Loopy Toad looked at Jinka curiously at that moment. Not much. Jinka shook his head and said modestly, just 1 billion. 1 billion, and you even broke the sword steel? Loopy Toad's mouth twitched. I just casually scratched it once. Jinka said, I didn't expect it to be so big. Loopy Toad. Chapter 1407. It's really not bad. Wang Ling couldn't help muttering as he gazed at the unprecedented scene in Sword King world. It was hard to imagine that this man would actually open his mouth for a newborn sword spirit. So, Sword Master wants to give him to Anwan? Jinka asked. To be honest, it wasn't that he didn't have this thought. The little sword spirit had great potential. If he nurtured her well, she would definitely be a great talent. Furthermore, Anwan had just been born. There were still a few years before she could start school. Although the little sword spirit was still a blank piece of paper, with enough potential and talent, she should be able to be nurtured in a few years. This was just a conservative estimate. Based on Leng Ming's overall aptitude, he wouldn't even need a few years. Or rather, he wouldn't even need a year. Perhaps he would only need a few months to learn all the knowledge of the human world before Anwan went to university. He would also be able to cultivate Anwan into an outstanding combat sword spirit. As the saying goes, it's better to be prepared. He had his eyes on Leng Ming, who was currently a blank piece of paper. He could keep him as a spare tire, and slowly nurture him. During the Sword Dao meet, Lotus Sun could still find another one based on her own ideas. What if Leng Ming's talent was focused on fighting and he wasn't good at studying? Therefore, it was better to find a spiritual sword that knew how to learn and loved to learn. No one stipulated that a person could only have one spirit sword. In Jianghu, having more swords won't burden you. It was not illegal to bind multiple spiritual swords at the same time. After making up his mind, he stared at Jinka and said telepathically, take him in. Jinka, me. You don't have any disciples yet, right? Wang Ling looked at Jinka and asked telepathically. Jinka. To be honest, he had never thought of accepting a disciple. But this was Wang Ling's idea. As the sword spirit, of course he would follow his master's wishes. He was confident that he could teach Leng Nether well. But when it came to studying, it might not be so easy. The main thing was that Jinka himself hadn't studied much. He had never formally attended any classes either. He had learned everything from watching Wang Ling do his homework on the side. If Wang Ling gave it his all, he could get 100 points. He could probably only get 90 points? There was still a huge gap between them. That's enough. Wang Ling looked at Jinka. He knew exactly what Jinka was thinking. This was Jian Xingzhong's first time being a Shifu, and furthermore, it was Wang Ling who had appointed him, so Jinka couldn't help feeling a little nervous. Really, is that okay? You're my sword, no problem. Wang Ling stroked Jinka's white fur again and said with a serious expression. Encouraged, Jinka took a deep breath and agreed. Okay, I'll take him in. At the same time, everyone in the vicinity of the Sword God Plaza was exclaiming in surprise. They were inexplicably shocked as they looked at the number that appeared on the sword steel in front of them. Those sword spirits who had yet to join in the fun and were rushing towards the Sword God Square from afar also stopped in their tracks. Over there, immortal light shone resplendently. The sword steel's unusual movements caused the entire sky of the Sword King realm to be dyed with 7 colors. These people had yet to see clearly what exactly was happening at the scene. They only felt shocked. Which sword spirit is it? Why haven't I felt this sword chi before? It's said to be a newly born little sword spirit, but a little sword spirit can actually cause the sword steel to resonate like this. Many of the sword spirit's eyes stung. The light in the sword god square in front of them was too dazzling, too blazing, and unimaginable. When they got closer, they saw Leng Ming standing in front of the sword steel in a daze, and they were even more dumbfounded. It really is a little sword spirit, transformed from a blade of grass? Many of the sword spirits were shocked and smiled bitterly. Each non-metal sword was more powerful than the last. Metal swords really had no way out. In that instant, Carter could feel a strong sour smell in the air, as if many of the people here had turned into lemon people. She could subconsciously sense that among the spectating sword spirits, many of them had turned their jealousy into hostility towards Leng Ming. Without thinking, Carter immediately rushed forward to protect Leng Ming. She grabbed Leng Ming's hand and took him away from the scene without saying a word. Quiet. Keep quiet. Wuji and Old Barbarian cooperated very well, and they immediately maintained order at the scene. In the Sword King realm, it was common to bully little sword spirits who had just been born. Whether it was humans or sword spirits, they would all be jealous. Leng Ming's aptitude was obvious, and many sword spirits already wanted to kill him. If they could capture Leng Ming and use the evil array to forcefully devour him, it would also be a way for sword spirits to improve themselves. However, such a method was seen as evil, and it was not recognized by the Sword King realm. However, Leng Ming's results in this test were too dazzling. It was necessary to be wary of others, and there would definitely be sword spirits who would be willing to do that. You guys can protect him now, but can you protect him forever? Someone stood up and was unconvinced. To many people, Leng Ming was just a little sword spirit, a nameless blade of grass. Now that this blade of grass was emitting light, many sword spirits were instantly filled with jealousy, and they almost had a mental breakdown. He clearly did not have enough battle power, but in this sword steel test, he was ranked first in the bronze rank. This test result even surpassed many people in the king group. Impossible. How could this be? There must be something wrong with the sword steel. Electric Cry felt as if he had been slapped hard in the face. Previously, he had put on airs in front of Leng Ming and everyone had seen it. Now that he was beaten by Leng Ming, Electric Cry felt that he had lost face. Whoever wants to fight, feel free to try, Carter said coldly. Her death lotus was already stirring. Her gaze deterred many sword spirits. At the same time, a white and flawless sword light descended from the sky. The person who had arrived was Mou, one of Yu Ling's best friends, who had rushed over after receiving the news. Mou wore a white short skirt, had long black hair, and wore a jade crown on her head. She was beautiful, and her whole body exuded a sweet fragrance. You are not allowed to fight in the sword capital royal city. Anyone who dares to do so will bear the consequences. The young girl saw everything from afar, and after landing she also started to intimidate others. The judges of the competition were the most interesting. You are not allowed to fight in the sword capital, but there will be a time when you can't protect him. At that moment, Electric Cry snorted and vented all his anger at losing face on Leng Ming. Kid, your battle power is not good enough. There will be a time when these people can't protect you. Just you wait. As soon as he said that, a streak of brown sword chi came from the horizon. Like a meteorite, it directly pierced through the sword storm in the Sword King world and stabbed toward Sword God Square. It was just a trace of sword chi, but its power was unimaginably great. In an instant, it turned into a bolt of divine punishment that accurately struck Electric Cry. Electric Cry directly vomited blood from the sword pressure brought by the sword chi, and his whole body sank deep into the ground, leaving only his head exposed. Everyone was shocked. Such powerful sword chi that was invincible in the world? There was only one person in the Sword King world who could do this. It's Lord Jinka. Sword Master has made a move. This actually alarmed Sword Master. Leng Ming, it's my disciple. Very quickly, Jinka's voice rang out throughout the Sword King world, shaking the hearts of all the sword spirits. Anyone who dares to make an enemy will bear the consequences. Chapter 1408. The King of Sword Spirits had personally come out. This had alarmed the entire Sword King world. This was something that none of the sword spirits could have imagined. A newborn little sword spirit was actually chosen by the King of Swords as his disciple. In Sword God Square, countless sword spirits were dumbfounded. Their emotions were unsettled, and they knew that they might be witnessing history. Has the King of Swords ever accepted a disciple? No? This little sword spirit called Leng Ming is the first. He actually accepted a disciple publicly. My youth is over. Many sword spirits sighed emotionally. As a newborn little sword spirit, Leng Ming had been chosen by the king of sword spirits with his extremely high aptitude and had been accepted as a disciple. Maybe Jianming was right. Carter, Wu Jin, and the others couldn't protect Leng Ming. There would always be times when Leng Ming wasn't around. But now, the boss of the entire Sword King world had appeared and publicly accepted this little sword spirit as his disciple. If anyone dared to provoke him again, Jianming would be smashed into the ground by the sword and bleeding from his 7 orifices. This was both a deterrent and a warning. For a moment, the sword spirits in Sword Saint Square who had been hostile to Leng Ming out of jealousy put away their thoughts. This little sword spirit's starting point was different. The king of sword spirits was often away from the Sword King world, so the sword spirits had never found an opportunity to curry favor with Jinka. Now that Leng Ming had become Jinka's disciple, he naturally became the first person to curry favor with. Sword Spirits Square instantly became lively, and many sword spirits with reputations in the Sword King world stepped forward to offer benefits to Leng Ming. Little brother, I run a royal sword spirit bath center. Come here to take a bath. Tell me my name is Qiao Shan. No charge. Little brother Leng Ming, we run a medical center. Chin Tsang Medical Center. If you're not feeling well, uncle will come and examine you. Go away, don't lead children astray. Come. Little Leng Ming, big sister runs a tutoring organization. If you need a teacher you can look for big sister anytime. For a moment, the scene went out of control because of Leng Ming's little interlude. Fortunately, Jinka's fate gave Carter, Wu Jin, and Old Barbarian clear instructions, and they were now even clearer about their attitude toward Leng Ming. The chaotic scene lasted for more than 10 minutes. It wasn't until Nine Nether and Yu Ling flew across the sky that the noisy square regained its peace. A man and a woman descended from the sky, looking like a perfect couple. It's Lord Abysmal and Lord Yu Ling. They're here too. I heard that Lord Abysmal specially went to find Lord Yu Ling to be a judge this time. All along, many people had mistakenly believed that there was a relationship between 9 underworlds and imperial spirits. Nine Nether was also very helpless about this. He really wanted to, but Yu Ling only had Jinka and Bai Qiao on her mind. For example, when he heard that Bai Qiao was inviting him to be a judge, he had come without a second word. After all, he was the sword spirit who was ranked 3rd on the sword ranking. There was no need for him to give face to the person ranked 5th. Sai, being 1 rank higher on the leaderboard, is crushing me to death. On the way to the plaza, Nine Nether smiled bitterly in her heart. Yu Ling rarely appeared in places with many people. Facing the unprecedentedly grand scene of the Sword God Plaza, she felt a little uncomfortable. However, it could be seen that she was still trying hard to adjust her emotions. Yu Ling waved her hand and supported her waist with one hand. Her figure was graceful, revealing her perfect curves. Everyone, please take care of me. I am also one of the judges for this sword principal meet. Her sweet voice swept through the entire Sword God Plaza, causing many male sword spirits to let their imaginations run wild. Just the sound alone was unbearable. Lady Yu Ling is so beautiful, like a fairy walking out of a painting. That's right. Lord Yu Ling's voice was just as pleasant to the ears as Lord Mou's. The contestants this time are in luck. Ozzel? With Lord Yu Ling joining us, I believe that the competition will be fair and just. Following the appearance of Yu Ling. At this point, the judges for the Sword Dao competition were also finalized. They were ranked 3,456th on the sword ranking. According to the order of the sword ranking, they were Yu Ling, Mou, Nine Nether, Xiao Qian. Be quiet, everyone. Sword God Plaza, do not make any noise. At this moment, Nine Nether hissed in a low voice, and it immediately took effect. Although she was only a manager, Nine Nether still had the dignity of a manager. Thereafter, under the suppression of Nine Nether and the others, the scene regained its order. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Nine Nether estimated that the 5 groups, with a total of 1,000 people, would all be settled by tomorrow. Then he just had to wait for the girl to participate in the competition the day after tomorrow. It could be said that everything was ready except for the east wind. December 8th, Tuesday. Lotus Sun had a sleepless night. Girls were always worried about their skin, so even Lotus Sun had a habit of going to bed early. However, the girl had thoroughly experienced the pain of tossing and turning in bed last night. Her mind was full of Jiang Ying. At the same time, she was constantly speculating about this girl's background, personality, hobbies, and so on, because of Lotus Sun's extraordinary imagination and ability to fill in the blanks. While she was thinking about Jiang Yingying, she directly used Jiang Yingying's point of view to create a girl romance of more than 100,000 words. The more she thought about it, the more complicated and bizarre it became, and the more she thought about it, the more she fell into insomnia. When she got up, Lotus Sun looked in the mirror and heaved a long sigh of relief when she found that she didn't have dark circles under her eyes. Damn, she's a cultivator after all. Some people can go several years without sleeping and be fine. Didn't Rongrong just stay up one night? She won't have dark circles under her eyes. Sun Yinger comforted her. She had witnessed the girl setting a new record for rolling on the bed last night. Rolling back and forth on the large bed that was dozens of meters long, she felt like she had finished a marathon in the morning. Worried that her complexion wasn't good, the girl looked in the mirror as soon as she woke up. However, as a shadow, Sun Yinger's focus wasn't on the girl's face at all, but on the girl's chest in front of the mirror with a face full of worry. Rongrong, if you can't sleep in the future, try not to roll around, Sun Yinger suggested earnestly. Lotus Sun? Sun Yinger, it's not big to begin with, what if it's rubbed flat? Lotus Sun clenched her fists angrily, wishing she could sew Sun Yinger's mouth shut. That morning Wang Ling walked straight in from the school gate. He didn't dare take the convenient transmission array again, mainly because he was worried that he would blow it up again. When he arrived at the classroom, Wang Ling found that Hero Gua and Super Chen were already sitting there. These two clowns had most likely gotten up early in the morning to copy each other's homework. Wang Ling, have you heard? Something happened to Wang Zhen next door. Hero Gua took the initiative to talk to Wang Ling. Wang Ling pretended to be calm. It seems to have something to do with that strange bunch of people who showed up at the door earlier. They said they were actors, but I think they were gangsters. Hero Gua said mysteriously, I heard that it was those gangsters who broke Wang Zhen's knees. Hearing this, Wang Ling couldn't help sighing. That was why people sometimes couldn't be too confident in their knees. How hard was the heavenly Dao durian that he had enchanted? Whoever knelt would know. Chapter 1409. Wang Zhen looked like he had run out of luck. But the truth was that Wang Zhen had only decided to kneel on the durian after careful consideration. Of course he knew that this heavenly Dao durian wasn't ordinary. It was an existence that Wang Ling had enlightened, and wouldn't shatter under his knees like an ordinary durian. If he knelt, his kneecap might shatter. Thus, before kneeling on the heavenly Dao durian, Wang Zhen had a very clear understanding of the situation. But in the end he still chose to kneel. Because at the same time Wang Zhen was well aware. If his knees were shattered, Wang Ling's anger would dissipate. Compared with breaking his knees, offending Wang Ling was far scarier than Wang Zhen had imagined. So, kneel if you want. In any case, cultivation medical technology was so advanced that even if it was broken, it could be repaired without leaving any sequelae. As long as Wang Ling's anger could be appeased, everything would be worth it. And it turned out that Wang Zhen's decision was completely correct. As for the fact that his knees had been beaten up by gangsters, this matter was completely unfounded. He didn't know how it had gotten out. Logically speaking, Lu Qingyi was the only one who knew about his injury. Lu Qingyi had actually covered it up very tightly so no one else should have known. Unless he had accidentally let the news slip out. But even if it had, it shouldn't have been so outrageous. Wang Zhen couldn't help sighing with emotion. This was the way things were on the internet nowadays. People who followed the crowd on the bandwagon often ignored the truth of the matter itself. Because what they really cared about wasn't the truth, but what they believed to be right. It was really scary to not have the ability to think independently nowadays. Elsewhere, Lotus Sun held a special student union meeting to discuss the vicious incident of Wang Zhen being suspected of being attacked by gangsters in front of the school gates. Lu Qingyi and Lotus Sun had in fact accidentally let it slip during their conversation about Wang Zhen's incident. Then, as the driving force behind the scenes, eldest Miss Sun had made it up. She wanted to hold a student union meeting to find out more about Jiang Yingying. Since there was a meeting, there had to be a reason. Wang Zhen's incident was actually the perfect excuse for the meeting. Who told Wang Zhen to be so mischievous? But after all, this was also using Wang Zhen. Lotus Sun had prepared some tonics for the couple's hotel where Wang Zhen was currently staying. There were all kinds of medicines that could treat bones, kidney deficiency. At 12:30 in the afternoon, it was originally the lunch break for each class. At this point, Lotus Sun called for a student council meeting. The student council was unable to punish the so-called underworld. However, as an organization that provided services to students, they could propose to the school to strengthen the security at the school gate during the dismissal period. Before all the participants started the meeting. Everyone thought it would be a serious meeting. In the end, when Lotus Sun suddenly asked for a person's name, everyone was baffled. Does everyone know this girl, Jiang Yingying? Lotus Sun smiled calmly. Everyone was stunned. Wait a minute. Weren't we supposed to be discussing the issue of strengthening the security at the school gate after school? Why did he suddenly change the topic to a girl? All the representatives of number 60 High's elite class were stupefied. President, is this girl related to this incident? Someone asked. No, I'm not sure yet. Lotus Sun said, I just heard some rumors, so I wanted to ask if everyone knows this girl so that I can sort out the information and verify whether it's true or not. The girl's serious expression made it sound like she was telling the truth, and the naive members of the student council instantly believed her. As expected of the president. As expected of classmate Lotus Sun, she's serious and rigorous. Someone couldn't help praising her on the spot. At the meeting, a lot of people were whispering to each other and talking animatedly. Basically, those who were willing to join the student council were social beauties who were active in various school circles, and more or less had some connections in other schools. After Lotus Sun asked this question, these people immediately took out their phones to ask their friends who they were familiar with. With so many people around, someone really did ask about Jiang Yingying. I got it. A girl with short hair raised her hand. Jiang Yingying, a girl from Sword God Academy. She also participated in the 9 Dragon Mountain National Body Technique competition before, but was eliminated very early on. Sword God Academy? Lotus Sun frowned slightly. Everyone knew that Sword God Academy was a school that Blademaster General Yi had invested in, and that his adopted son Yi Jiang was studying there. Loopy Toad had previously speculated that Jiang Yingying might be related to Battle Saint Marshal Jiang. Then, if Jiang Yingying was also studying here, then this could almost be considered a solid piece of evidence. So she was a student from Sword God Academy? Lotus Sun was pleasantly surprised by this new discovery. In this way, the clues to the incident and the relationship between the characters were all connected. Lotus Sun was almost certain that this was the Jiang Yingying she was looking for. Do you have a photo? Lotus Sun asked. Yes. The short-haired girl pulled out Jiang Yingying's photo, which someone had just sent her. The person who had sent her the information was a boy from Sword God Academy, who was also a member of the student council. This person looks a little like you, President. The girl swiped her hand across the air, and the photo on her phone was projected into the air in the conference room. When everyone saw Jiang Yingying's face clearly, they couldn't help gasping. You can't say they look particularly alike, but at first glance they look a little alike. That's so cool. I still think our president is good looking. Lotus Sun gazed at this face that looked a lot like her own, and at the same time she was thinking of countermeasures. Looking at the information she had so far, Jiang Yingying was pretty much what she had speculated. Basically, the fact that she had been able to participate in the 9 Dragon Mountain National Body Technique competition was already enough to prove that Jiang Yingying's grades at Sword God Academy were pretty good. It was just that she had been a little unlucky during the competition and had been eliminated very early on, which was why Lotus Sun hadn't noticed her. So, did she fall in love with classmate Wang Ling during the 9 Dragon Mountain National Body Technique competition? Lotus Sun wondered. After the student council meeting, Lotus Sun spent the afternoon thinking about how to approach Jiang Yingying. It would be very unnatural if she came knocking on her door abruptly. However, what the girl never expected was that something unexpected would happen again just as school was about to end. Lotus Sun was called into Headmaster Chen's office. Student Lotus Sun, you're the president of the student council. Our school will soon have a new batch of transfer students. I hope you can take the lead and get these students to integrate into our school environment as soon as possible. Very well, Headmaster, I'll do my best. Lotus Sun nodded. Student Sun is excellent, there won't be any problems. Headmaster Chen smiled as he handed her a booklet. This is the list, take a look. Lotus Sun opened the booklet. The name of the first person on the list immediately caught her attention. It wasn't anyone else. It was none other than Sword God Academy's Jiang Yingying. In a flash, a sense of crisis welled up in Lotus Sun's heart. Chapter 14:10. Preemptive Strike. This was something Lotus Sun hadn't expected. Sword God Academy wasn't bad since it had been established with General Yi's investment. Although it hadn't been long since it opened, it was a famous key city high school with a strong faculty. A lot of rich people couldn't get in even if they wanted to, but Jiang Yingying had chosen to give up and come to number 60 high. Her goal was very clear. She was here for Wang Ling. Looking at the list, Lotus Sun's mood was very complicated. It said that this batch of transfer students would be enrolled by next Monday at the latest. That was to say, she had no idea when Jiang Yingying would be coming. So now she only knew one thing. She had to be ready at all times. It could be said that Jiang Yingying's move had affected everything. Around the time number 60 high students were out of school, Loopy Toad specially went to Wei Ji's apartment to find out more about Jiang Yingying. It wasn't that Loopy Toad wanted to know the situation. The point was that Lotus Sun had promised it benefits. Now that Loopy Toad had decided to live in the human world, it had to think about its future. And life was nothing more than work, find a partner, get married and have a son and a daughter or something. But here was the problem. Loopy Toad's assets in the human world were limited. And now, finding a partner was actually a very real problem. For example, between a handsome pauper and an ugly tycoon, most people were more inclined to the material world. After all, as long as you had money, no matter how ugly you were, you could change your appearance. Besides, Loopy Toad didn't think its human form was ugly. It just lacked certain assets. So now, helping Big Miss Sun work, and doing some groceries was undoubtedly the best way to make money. When Loopy Toad came to look for Wei Ji, Gu Xuanji was still at number 60 high, and only Zhao Qingxian was helping Wei Ji. Fatty Zhao Qingxian had already switched back to his original body with Fan Xing, and now looked a lot more peaceful. But Loopy Toad felt that this was probably the calm before the storm. Who knew what this guy was thinking? He wouldn't give up on Lu Qingyi so easily. Thus, the biggest beneficiary of the Yang Shuangji incident that Baizhi had transformed into was actually Fan Xing. This guy had already been a cripple, but because of the body swap, his injuries had inadvertently healed. You want to ask about Jiang Yingying? Wei Ji was a little surprised by Loopy Toad's question. He habitually grabbed the brim of his cap and turned it clockwise, revealing his smooth forehead. Then he handed the showerhead in his hand to Zhao Qingxian. Right now, they were cultivating spirit plants in a modified greenhouse. These spirit plants were used to make special fertilizers that could help spirit beasts grow better. After handing over his work to Zhao Qingxian, Wei Ji led Loopy Toad to the tea room next door. He closed the door and then activated the soundproof array. Although he didn't think Zhao Qingxian would eavesdrop, Jiang Yingying's problem was a private matter. Wei Ji felt it was safer to do it this way. Is this necessary? Loopy Toad couldn't help laughing. Why did you suddenly want to ask about Miss Yingying? Wei Ji was also curious. He poured Loopy Toad a cup of tea to understand its true thoughts. Isn't this girl going to transfer to number 60 high soon? I was asked by someone to come and find out more. Loopy Toad gave Wei Ji a meaningful look. Did Miss Sun ask you to come? Wei Ji instantly understood the purpose of Loopy Toad's trip. It could only be said that he was, in the end, one of Loopy Toad's best friends in the human world. There were times when a pair of tacit friends only needed one look to guess what it meant. Then can you tell me? If it's not convenient for you, I'll think of something else. I won't force you, Loopy Toad said. After all, the person asking might be the granddaughter of one of the 10 generals, so Loopy Toad understood that it wasn't convenient for Wei Ji to say more. I've already activated the soundproof array. Of course I want to tell you. But what I know is very limited. Wei Ji smiled and flipped through the photo album under the tea table. There was a photo of Wei Ji and a girl who looked somewhat similar to Lotus Sunday. The girl was holding a large orange-yellow spirit bird and smiling very happily. This is Miss Yingying. This was Loopy Toad's first time seeing a photo of Jiang Yingying. If it hadn't taken a closer look, it would have almost thought it was Lotus Sunday. But after careful observation, Loopy Toad felt that the differences were very obvious. First of all, Jiang Yingying had short hair and a mole on the tip of her nose. Maybe it was because of the photo, but her skin wasn't as fair as Lotus Sun's. So Loopy Toad concluded, Boss is still the best looking. You work for Boss Lotus Sun, your salary must be very high, right? Wei Ji gossiped. Not high, not high. I only got 100,000 yuan for one piece of information. I'll remember to send you a red packet when I get my salary. Wei Ji sighed. When all was said and done, she was the young miss of a rich family. Money was too easy to earn. Miss Yingying is indeed Uncle Zhang's granddaughter, but she's not his biological daughter. She was adopted when she was very young, said Wei Ji. Adopted again? Loopy Toad's mouth twitched. What was wrong with the 10 generals? They just liked to raise children. But it wasn't that Loopy Toad couldn't understand. When a cultivator's cultivation reached a high enough level, there would always be some abstinent cultivators. In layman's terms, they had been single for too long and were used to it. How did the saying go? Being single is great. Being single is always great. Since they didn't want to marry a wife and wanted to raise a child to inherit their legacy, adoption was the most convenient method. Very few people know about this, and Uncle Jiang didn't tell anyone. As for how I found out, I actually discovered it by accident, said Wei Ji. But he didn't say exactly how he had discovered this relationship. Uncle Jiang regards Miss Yingying as his own. If anything happens to her spirit beast, he basically sends it to me for treatment. All in all, Miss Yingying is a very gentle and quiet girl with an air of literature. A literary girl? More or less. Wei Ji nodded. Hearing this, Loopy Toad suddenly had a bold guess. Since this Miss Jiang Yingying liked literature, then was there another possibility? She actually wasn't attracted to Little Master Ling. It had to be noted that during the National Body Technique competition on Nine Dragon Mountain, when Little Master Ling and Wang Ying had been playing with meteorites in space, it had been Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch who had stood in for him. Furthermore, while he had been the substitute, he had completed an astonishing essay with full marks. Chapter 1411. Is there anything else of value? No matter how small it is, Loopy Toad asked. It wasn't very happy. Sure enough, getting information from Wei Ji was the right thing to do. Together, there were already hundreds of thousands of yuan in the account. But this wasn't enough for a down payment on a property. Nowadays, housing prices were ridiculously high. It could only be saved for the time being and accumulated bit by bit. Even if Loopy Toad invested it, it would still be very risky. After all, it was possible to lose money investing in oil nowadays, so nothing was impossible. Let me think. Wei Ji rubbed his chin and thought hard. After a moment, he had an idea. Ah, that's right, have you heard of gray powder? What's that? Loopy Toad didn't understand. Gray powder? A fan of the gray fog creature? But Gray Fog Lord's groundhog was still being suppressed under the water tower in Battle Sect Central Lake. Because of the pain of losing its balls, Loopy Toad was still petrified and hadn't come back to its senses yet. I just heard about it. When I was chatting with Miss Yingying last time, she casually mentioned that she joined a gray sect and became a gray powder, Wei Ji said. It's not some evil religion, is it? After all, with Marshal Jiang around, it's unlikely to be a cult. It's probably some kind of fan club. Wei Ji replied. Miss Yingying also said that everyone in the gray sect is a speck of ash in the times. At that moment, Loopy Toad finally understood. A speck of ash in the times was a famous scene that would last forever. This essay from the Nine Dragons Mountain Conclave was still in the National Middle School Student Essay Library, and was about to be published as a book as one of the essays in the National Selection of Outstanding Essays. Student Wang Ling, who had been mistaken for the original author, was about to receive a one-time payment of around 3,000 yuan for this reason. But since this was also using his ability to make money, Father Wang had directly contacted the publishing firm and asked them to donate the money in Wang Ling's name. So from what Wei Ji had learned, Loopy Toad suddenly felt that Wang Ling was a little pitiful. If Jiang Yingying really took a fancy to Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch, what would happen then? After doing her homework that night, Lotus Sun kept thinking about Jiang Yingying. Sun Yinger comforted her. Rong Rong, don't think too much. Maybe he was here to learn. Also, I don't think you need to worry at all. Ling Jinren is a block of wood that you can't move. How could Jiang Yingying get her way so easily? She thought this would comfort Lotus Sun, but in the end, it only made her feel worse. Yes. If only Wang Ling wasn't a blockhead. At that moment, the phone on the table vibrated as Lotus Sun received a message from Loopy Toad. It was full of information on Jiang Yingying that Loopy Toad had obtained from Wei Ji, as well as Loopy Toad's speculations about this matter. So, the person classmate Jiang Yingying might actually like his senior Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch? Lotus Sun stared at the message, and her initially gloomy mood seemed to ease up quite a bit. But Loopy Toad's speculation alone didn't seem to prove anything. After all, from Jiang Yingying's subjective point of view, she didn't know that Wang Ling wasn't the real author of the essay at the Nine Dragon Mountain National Body Technique competition. So what Lotus Sun had to do now was sort out these misunderstandings. The girl originally thought that this was just an ordinary competitor. Unexpectedly, the situation was far more complicated than she had imagined. There's no other way. It looks like we can only infiltrate the enemy's ranks and gain a deeper understanding of the situation, Lotus Sun muttered with a frown after thinking for a while. Rongrong wants to join that gray sect? That's the only way now. Lotus Sun nodded. But this matter couldn't be rushed for the time being. For Lotus Sun, she still had the task of replacing the Heavenly Dao Magic Cube. At around 8 o'clock in the evening, Loopy Toad appeared at the door of Lotus Sun's bedroom on time. The girl was ready. The fourth magic cube was located in another universe secret land called the Ageless Star. Are you ready, boss? Loopy Toad asked. You've worked hard on today's information, Loopy Toad. The money will be in tomorrow. Lotus Sun smiled. Let's make it quick. I have more important things to do when I come back. She was already very familiar with the process of replacing the magic cube. As long as the magic cube didn't go berserk, there was almost no risk in collecting the magic cube as long as she brought Mysterious Sea with her. And after this trip back, Mysterious Sea had reached the standard of 4 cores. The first core was Alluring Sword, the second core was Alluring Sword, the third core was Alluring Sword, and the fourth core was Alluring Sword Plus. With 3 cores, Mysterious Sea could already destroy the Earth, and with 4 cores he could destroy a planet that was 100 times larger than the Earth. At the same time, in a Xanxing apartment building 100 kilometers away from Lotus Sun's house, there were satellite monitors everywhere. After a flurry of signals, the image finally froze on the villa where Lotus Sun lived. 2 technicians adjusted the satellite image. Young master, there was a brief fluctuation in the signal just now, but it's normal now. Behind them, a handsome young man in a suit and leather shoes leaned back in a wide leather recliner. His feet were crossed on the table as he frowned slightly. When on earth will the heavenly eye be able to see into my little sister's bedroom? The owner of this Xanxing apartment building was none other than Fan Xing. He was the building owner. The entire apartment building was his territory. Ever since he had recovered, he had been pondering a plan for revenge. During this period of time, the pain he had suffered in the Sun family villa. Every time Fan Xing thought about it, he would feel depressed and unable to get rid of it. It was as if there was a blood clot in his heart. But it seemed he wasn't fated to die. Although he didn't know what was going on, in a very short period of time, his body had completely recovered and reached the level of a normal person's health. Even the doctor who had treated him had said that this might be a miracle in the history of cultivation medicine. Young master, for some reason, there's always a very strong magnetic field in Miss Sun's bedroom. Maybe old Master Sun has sent an expert to protect her? That's also why our satellite signals have been unable to penetrate it. Expert? How strong? I'm well aware of the strength of the expert in my little sister's villa. The heavenly eye I set up can easily spy on even soul formation cultivators. Fan Xing said. His original intention had been to secretly take some private photos of Lotus Sun and then spread them online. But now it seemed that this path wasn't going smoothly. Logically speaking, Lotus Sun was only at the foundation establishment stage. And this was in her bedroom, so how could there be an expert lurking in a girl's bedroom? Could it be that his little sister had become a true immortal expert in a few days? That didn't make sense. Forget it, let's just carry out the original plan. Fan Xing sighed and waved his hand. Yes, young master. The technicians nodded and they began to remotely mobilize the heavenly eye. Fan Xing's heavenly eye satellite also had the ability to summon meteorites. It could use scientific means to absorb nearby meteorites, and then twist the meteorite's intelligence to a specific orbit to accurately strike the target. That was right. His goal was to blow up the entire Sun family villa and then destroy Lotus Sun along with it. Chapter 14:12. Before she left, she vaguely sensed that something wasn't right. The girl raised her head and stared at the night sky. For some reason, she had a vague feeling that there was a murderous aura coming from beyond the heavens. But she wasn't sure, and thought it was just her imagination. In fact, Sun Yinger and Loopy Toad had also sensed it. After leveling up to a divine beast, Loopy Toad could sense the power of chaos scattered throughout the universe. This power of chaos had become Loopy Toad's other major sensory organ, making it particularly sensitive to malice. At the same time as the Lord of the Void and Lotus Sun's personal female bodyguard, Sun Yinger still had the most basic awareness of defense. Do you sense a faint murderous aura? Loopy Toad asked the girl at that moment. Lotus Sun nodded. Don't doubt yourself, your judgment isn't wrong. Loopy Toad frowned. In the passive one with the sword state, the sword chi emitted by Mysterious C was like an amplification device installed on the girl's body, greatly enhancing her ability to predict danger. Why do I feel like it's coming from space? Lotus Sun felt it. She stared at a spot in the sky where the heavenly eye was. It seems to be a satellite that's trying to launch an attack on this place, said Loopy Toad. Satellite? The girl was surprised. There weren't many offensive satellites nowadays that were used as weapons. The Heavenly Justice E-Bomb, developed by Wuxia Nation's Cultivation and Magic Treasure Research Institute, was in fact still a destructive attack weapon launched from a satellite. Every country in the world strictly controlled weapon satellites, and even Huagua Water Curtain Group didn't have the right to launch one. Loopy Toad exhaled into the air, and the weapon satellite that was trying to launch an attack on Lotus Sun's house in space was projected into the air like a mirage. Looking at the scale of the weapon, I can basically tell that it's a private satellite. Lotus Sun frowned. Huagua Water Curtain Group had once launched artificial illumination satellites into space for the cultivation of spirit plants, so the girl had in fact done some research on the classification of satellites. A national weapon satellite was a huge object with a clear flag symbol on it, while a private satellite was a blank slate. I never thought that there would actually be someone who wants your life now. Loopy Toad couldn't help sighing. No matter who was behind it, it was mourning for the culprit. Not everyone could be provoked. What's more, the person he was provoking now was the strongest Foundation establishment cultivator on Earth. Forget it, I don't care who it is. Retrieving the Rubik's Cube is more important now, and I have more important things to do when I come back. Lotus Sun extracted one of Mysterious C's clones from his sword spirit space and left him here to oversee the villa. She didn't take this target seriously at all. Then let's go. Loopy Toad felt that the girl's way of doing things had become increasingly mature. A few seconds later, they followed Lord Ma's golden teleportation light to the universe mystic realm Immortal Star to retrieve the fourth cube. The doppelganger, Mysterious C, stayed here alone in the empty room. His sapphire-like eyes were a bit empty. The breeze outside the window blew his curly hair, and his silver-gray hair fluttered gently like waves. Xianxing Apartments. Everything was ready. The Heavenly Eye had finished absorbing the meteorite. With just one order, they could launch a precise attack on Lotus Sun's villa. Do it, Fan Xing gave his final order. There was a loud bang. The Heavenly Eye's mechanical thrusters abruptly pushed the meteorite into orbit according to the calculations. In an instant, the meteorite shot out and fell into the atmosphere, then rubbed against each other to generate tremendous energy. For a moment, the sky split open and rapidly spread forward. A terrifying burst of energy. Fan Xing had secretly gathered a lot of civilian scientists to discuss and design this Heavenly Eye, and he had commissioned a craftsman to personally build it. For this he had paid a huge price. At the same time, this was Fan Xing's first time using the Heavenly Eye. Master Shouchong really didn't lie to me. The Heavenly Eye is indeed powerful enough. It's so easy to use. Fan Xing stared at the image transmitted back from the monitor, feeling very happy. He felt that he had really found the right person, and the Master Shouchong he had praised was the true name of this civilian craftsman. This craftsman was called Shouchong. Young Master, everything is working normally now. The Heavenly Eye has calculated that the meteorite is already in position and can accurately land on top of the villa, said a technician. At the same time, he was also very curious about this craftsman that Fan Xing had found. Where on earth did you find him, young master? I met him by chance. I saw him pacing back and forth at the entrance of the Academy of Sciences, and he was stopped by the security guards at the entrance every time. Out of curiosity, I went to ask about the situation. In the end, I didn't expect to accidentally find such a talent. I invested a lot of money into him, and now many of his inventions are in the testing stage. Soon I will be able to apply for a patent. Fan Xing smiled. If I can put them into mass production and go on the market in the future, the technology empire that I establish might not be any worse than Huagua Water Curtain Group. In the past 2 years, due to the excessive mining of spirit herbs, the market price of spirit herbs kept rising. As the cost of pills increased, the price naturally increased as well. This directly caused people who could not afford to buy pills to be even more unable to afford them, and those who could afford to buy pills felt that it was not worth it.